So Ben, did you resend that new link?
I haven't yet. I'll send it.
Okay. All right.
I'll send it after class. Like,
No. I meant the link for this meeting.
To this meeting? Well, you're
yeah,
on.
So I've got it on my phone, but I can't find it on the. I cannot. The one on the email did not work. So we're just like on my phone, but it's so small you can hardly see.
Oh, I can re-email that link. Hold on.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because the screen's so small on our phone that I can't see your slides.
No problem. Let's do that right now. I just emailed it over. Let's see. Can you get into the Dwayne Hansen?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're in it right now.
Yeah, dmh.hansen@gmail.com. New link is the email.
Right.
I sent it out at 8:04 p.m.
Okay.
And I tried that link. It would not open. But now I'm not even getting it.
You might try hard copy and pasting it into your browser, like URL bar. That might solve it.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll keep doing the cell phone for now. Keep going. Keep trucking. Sorry.
If you want to work on the computer and try and get that over, is there another email address you want me to try?
No, for right now, I think this is fine.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'll see if you pop in from another link because I can see everybody's links. All right. Well, we are recording. Okay. Well, good evening, guys. Welcome to Science of Diving Night 3. For some of you, we'll see where we're at, but for some of you, this might be the last needed class. For some of you, I might suggest we have an overview class as well, just to make sure that we're good to go. First question is how is everybody doing on their homework? Jolene and Dwayne, I believe you said you were 100%.
Yeah, we finished that.
Yeah, we knew we were leaving, so we tried to get that done.
Awesome. And by the way, when you guys get back, let me know when you're back. Nikki and I want to take you guys on a side mount adventure in the pool.
That'd be awesome.
So when you guys get back, we'll load you up at our side mount rigs, and because you guys are about our sizes, and we're going to take you on a experienced side mount. Don, how are you doing on your homework?
Oh, I'm somewhere around halfway through the book, but I mean, we've covered enough of this stuff, and it's pretty repetitive that I'm not too worried about it.
Cool. Dallin, how about you on the homework?
I'm still halfway. I had a bunch of the pool today, so I hadn't been able to touch it today.
Dallin.
Hello?
Dallin?
Can you hear me?
Yep, there we go. Ding, ding.
Okay, so I was saying that I'm about halfway still. I had a pool today, so I hadn't been able to touch it today.
Cool. Okay. If you would, when you get a chance, if you finish that over, text me when you're 100% as well. And then Aaron.
I finished it a month or so ago, but I went over it again this morning and went through it again just because I wanted to make sure I remembered it all.
Perfect. All right. I made those notes as well. I'm a big note taker and a postie king. I get posties just to give you an idea, I get posties by the block. I love swag posties because they're free. I don't have to pay for them. So they're awesome. Okay, perfect. So like I said, at the end of this meeting, I'd like to have a one-on-one with each of you just real quick. Just stay on the call. And what I'll do is I'll just kick everybody out of the meeting for just a second and bring you in, then exit you out. Okay, so tonight's subject is going to be effects of oxygen on the diver. Very exciting stuff. Very exciting as well. So we're going to talk about hypoxia and antioxia. Hypoxia, which is low oxygen, the physical types of hypoxia, symptoms of hypoxia, prevention, and hyperoxia or oxygen toxicity. We're also going to go in as we're talking about oxygen toxicity or hyperoxia. We're going to talk a little bit about the CNS hit on that, or the central nervous system oxygen toxicity. So generally CNS, central nervous system, certainly is an acronym, but when we talk about CNS and diving, we're talking about the effects or an attack or a hit on the system itself. So we're adding a little bit of subtext and diving when we talk about CNS. So if we talk to Dwayne and we say CNS, he's like, all right, good. You have a central nervous system. Congratulations. But in diving, we kind of put the subtext on it that we're talking about the effects of the central nervous system on that and what's happening to our system. Generally, we're talking about toxicity is when we're talking about that. So if I say that, we're really talking about something that's fairly negative overall. We're going to talk about the factors and tolerances of high pressures of oxygen on the system and the etiology of and physiology of CNS oxygen toxicity. Does that sound super exciting, guys? Or are you guys just like wound up beyond all control after hearing that description? I was too, absolutely. I don't blame you. All righty. Okay, so central nervous system oxygen toxicity. We're also talking about the signs and symptoms of it. I had this slide in there twice, so I apologize. Okay, so oxygen toxicity signs and symptoms. Dr. J. Lauren first discussed this and described this oxygen toxicity effects back in 1899. So, and I'd be willing to bet that Dwayne will attest to this, that there's a lot of medical theory and a lot of medical ideas that have been around for decades, and even up into in the century mark, right? Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think that's true.
Absolutely. So he was the first one to really talk about that, and we'll get into to decompression theory as well. And Haldane was the first one to set up decompression theory, and he set it up in 1905. So we've really kind of had a good understanding of a lot of this and how oxygen and how nitrogen affects our system in diving for a long time, and longer than most people realize. Even though the diving industry is still very, very young, truthfully, the on-demand regular really only came around in the 60s, right? And that was part of Jacques Cousteau's company that really helped that along. It wasn't until the late 80s, early 90s that we really introduced the safety second. And we can thank Sheck Exley for that one. Although he died in a diving accident where he was trying to break the limits, he still was a very big believer in safety and was the first people to introduce trimix into deep diving. So some interesting things. So interestingly enough, Dr. Lorraine Smith, he noted that the severity of oxygen toxicity increased with partial pressures that affected where the effects were very much largely reversible. And that's kind of an interesting thing to talk about it and understand that the effects of oxygen partial pressures between 0.45 and 1.6 were primarily effects that happen in the lungs. After that, once it got over 1.6 partial pressure, he discovered that most of those effects happened in the brain itself. So he was really interesting, and he did a lot of these studies on rats, just to give you an idea where his studies came into. So oxygen signs and symptoms. So the earliest signs and symptom of pulmonary lung oxygen toxicity is simply a mild irritation in the throat, made worse by deep breathing. So you start getting a little irritation, a sore throat. A mild cough develops next, followed by more irritation and cough until breathing becomes really painful and coughs can become uncontrollable. Now, if oxygen is continued, the person will start to notice a tightening of the chest, difficult breathing, and shortness of breath. And if exposure happens for too long, the person actually dies from lack of oxygen because the body's not able to process that oxygen in the system anymore. The partial pressure is too dense, and the oxygen is not, the alveoli are not able to break it down into usable oxygen pieces in the lungs. And so the progressive damage to the lungs eventually makes it impossible to get the blood through and pass to the bloodstream through the lungs. So it gets pretty scary. But here's where it gets kind of interesting. So the time onset for symptoms is highly variable. Now, again, we've talked about this. Jolene, how you process oxygen and you use oxygen in your body for a 5-mile run versus how Dawn does are very different. Dawn's going to get up tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. He's going to drink a Jolt Cola and or a Red Bull. I think kids drink Red Bull now. A Red Bull and a vodka together. Put his silky running on, and he's going to go running for 5 miles, and he'll knock out a 5-mile run in 30 minutes. It's pretty amazing, right? You and I, we'll get up at 5 a.m. and the first thing we'll do is try to make sure that the body's not going to creak and crack too much as we roll out of bed. And then finally we'll wander downstairs, and eventually we'll have our glass of milk, and we'll read some news online and putz around a little bit. And by 7:30 a.m. we're ready to actually get dressed and head off to our day. By that point, Don's run 5 miles, had 4 more Red Bulls, and he's ready to go off and do whatever Don does and save 18 lives tomorrow. So how we all process oxygen is very differently. You know, it happens to do with age. It has to do with physical capacity. It has to do with a lot of factors. It has to do with the cold. It has to do with our breathing rate, our mind development. One of the interesting things I teach solo diving, so I like to preface this with the fact that I do teach solo diving in this portion. But I was doing a solo dive at 108 feet in Ryrie Reservoir one time, and I got caught up in something where something pulled the regulator out of my mouth. And I tell the story a lot because it's just a great example. And my light went off at the same time, and I couldn't pull the regulator back. So in about a minute, I'm trying to figure out how to get this regulator back. I'm trying to get, I got to my second, and then figured out that I had a GoPro light. And I was able to flip my GoPro light on and figure the light out, figure the regulator out, got the regulator switched, got my light fixed again, started my dive again. It honestly took all of about a minute in time. Now, as I look at my dive computer, it's really interesting to watch is that I was kicking along at about 9 PSI a minute per my Perdix at the time, right? Boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden, you can tell where in the dive cycle that this happened, because all of a sudden my breathing went from 9 PSI per minute to 35 PSI per minute. The only thing that changed was between my ears. The 6 inches between my ears had made a major shift and said, oh, crap, bad shit's happening. So a lot of this has to do with your brain, has to do with your body and your physiology, has to do with cold, has to do with the situations you're in. So be aware of that, that how this all happens. But it's interesting to note in this that most individuals can tolerate up to 16 hours at 1.0 of oxygen. Of 100% oxygen, the average individual can remain at 100% oxygen. Dr. Dwayne, what's the longest you've ever put anybody on pure O?
Oh, well, usually when we put them to sleep, I know they oxygenate them with 100% oxygen for a few minutes before they actually induce, and get their sats up up to 100%. But I think that's the longest I've ever seen anybody on 100%.
Exactly. So, as you can see in the medical field, they keep it very low. But the good news is by studies that we determined that the average individual, most individuals, certainly not Czech Exley, I'm sure that guy, he was the original Chuck Norris, could stand 100% oxygen for up to 16 hours. Now, the average individual, again, can stand 1.5 partial pressure for 8 to 14 hours. And then the average individual can actually can tolerate 3 to 6 hours at 200% partial pressure of oxygen before developing the mild symptoms. Let's go back and let's talk about those mild symptoms for just a moment. So mild symptoms are, again, irritation in the throat made worse by deep breathing, cough, more severe coughing until breathing becomes painful, tightness of the chest, difficulty breathing, and shortness of breath, right? That's if it's continued for a even longer period of time. So the good news is you actually have a fair amount of capacity to stand high partial pressures of oxygen. But we want to make sure you're safe, and we always want to make sure that in diving that we're accounting for the least common denominator. So all these charts that we're giving you today, our dive computers, the Bowman chart, everything we're talking about today has been whittled down and whittled down and whittled down, because the original charts were based upon a 19-year-old perfectly fit Navy guy that got up that morning and ran 5 miles because he thought it was a fun thing to do, drank 3 Red Bulls, and then it had 3 plates of eggs and 2 pizzas, right? Because he could do that, no big deal. So unfortunately, Don, I'm sorry, they don't test, Marines are too smart to allow the Navy to test on them for diving. So they test it on the sailors because they're not real smart. So that's the secret there. So, but overall, we get that idea that there are several ways to track pulmonary oxygen toxicity, but the most sensitive and accurate is when they develop symptoms. That's kind of sad if you ask me. That the way we're really going to get into this and understand, am I taking an oxygen hit or an O hit, right, is when I start feeling a symptom, start feeling symptomatic. Overall, that's why I say again, over and over and over again, that diving is the most self-aware sport you'll ever be in. Now, the second technique to monitor that is vital capacity, the amount of air that can be moved in one large breath. And it decreases with increasing pulmonary toxicity. So the more toxicity you take, the more it reduces. So a reduction of approximately 2% in vital capacity correlates with mild symptoms, while a reduction of 10% correlates in symptoms so severe that most individuals will not voluntarily continue to breathe oxygen. These mild effects are completely reversible, and no permanent lung damage may occur. Now, however, the damage may take 2 to 4 weeks to heal. So I want you guys to think about this. If you decide that your path leads you to carrying a pony bottle as a secondary source of air, one of the things that I see a lot of divers make a huge mistake in is they just throw air, just 20% air, 79% nitrox in their pony bottle. Is there a better thought process on that? Dallin, what do you think? What gas should I put in my pony bottle?
So with let's see.
Actually, let's back up. Dallin, what do you think a pony bottle's for?
So isn't your pony bottle just your spare breather?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Something happens. I'm on a dive. I can't get to my buddy. I run out of gas. I have a catastrophic gas failure. Whatever happens, that my primary gas is gone. Now I have a completely redundant source of gas. So it's not what I'm planning on using or breathing during my dive. It's emergency only. It's if I can't get to my buddy or for whatever reason, that's what a pony bottle is. It's just a redundant source of gas that I'm if I have to use it, that means there's an emergency. So does that make sense?
Yeah. So okay. So even at your shorter depths, wouldn't that still be just using oxygen in your pony bottle?
Oxygen, or are you rated to use pure oxygen, or what percentage of oxygen?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there you go. Perfect. So what gas should you use in your pony bottle?
So if you're not using, I don't know. So I can't tell you the why, but I'm thinking helium.
Nope.
No? Okay.
Nope. You guys aren't ready. Now there's a gas that you should be certified to use. We use air and
nitrox.
Nitrox, right? You're certified for nitrox, right, Dallin?
No.
No. Okay. We need to take care of that.
Yep.
I can help you with that after the call. Let me know. Get signed up for nitrox. I have one of my nitrox classes recorded. You can watch it in the middle of the night, middle of the day, middle of the morning, whatever works for you. And then we can sit down and have a half-hour class.
Okay.
Knock it out. So it really becomes, and I honestly think we probably do it in 20 minutes. So I apologize. I figured you were certified for nitrox by taking this class. So your nitrox class will help make a lot of sense. Will make a lot more sense after this class, but this class would have made more sense after taking nitrox. So no problem. Okay, so I'm going to skip you on this one, Dallin, and we're going to come back to you if you don't mind on that one.
Okay.
Don, what gas should I use in my pony bottle?
Depending on depth, you should be running about as high oxygen as you can to scrub out the nitrogen in the event that you need to. So if you're going to be at 60 to 100 feet, you could probably stand anywhere from 40 to 60% nitrox.
Okay. Are you certified for 60%?
I'm not.
Okay. So
yeah, but Ben, you don't know you don't know what depth your pony bottle is going to be needed, right? I mean, typically you save it for like your safety stop or something like that is where you kind of hope you have to use it, but you don't know how depth you're going to be at, right?
Exactly. You're on the right path, but I want to back you guys up to this chart that we're looking at right here. So if Jolene, on that theory, you and I are gone for a dive, and I've disappeared or you've disappeared on me, one or the other. We no longer are at a safe point. And we decide that you and I and you have a catastrophic gas failure at 130 feet, and you have to switch over to your pony. Oh, we lost him. So I'll switch over to you, Aaron, since I've already picked on Dawn. So you have a catastrophic gas failure at 130 feet. Oh, they're coming back. I think they must have figured out the computer.
Just start getting your slides.
Well, yeah, the slides are going weird too.
No
Sorry
worries.
about.
No worries.
The question again, what was that?
So we've gone for a dive together, and I've disappeared or you disappeared, one or the other, and you have a catastrophic gas failure, and you have to switch over to your pony bottle. What is the next thing you do after you are breathing air consistently from your pony?
Well, you want to make sure your partner's around.
Your partner's gone. You have no clue. You've had a catastrophic gas failure.
Well, I think you got to start making your way to the top.
Exactly. You got to start your ascent immediately, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and on a pony bottle, so you're diving a 30 cubic foot pony bottle at 3,000 psi, 20 foot, 30 foot, 50 foot, or 50 cubic foot, whatever it is. Even a 20 cubic foot is still a fair amount of gas. How long will that pony bottle last you?
It might last you for a safety stop and then getting up to the top, but it's not going to last very long.
Well, let's think about that for a minute. So it's 30. If it's 30 cubic feet and you're used to diving an 80 cubic foot tank, how long can you get out of an 80 cubic foot tank?
How long can you get out of it? A long time.
Yeah, an hour.
An hour. Yeah.
Okay, so a 30 cubic foot tank would literally roughly be a third of that. So you should be able to get at least 20 minutes, right? At the minimum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. So your pony bottle's got 20 minutes of gas. Can you make a safe ascent and a 5-minute safety stop with a pony bottle of 30 cubic feet now?
Should be able to.
Easily, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's our first logic: is we've got plenty of time and we can make a safe ascent. Now let's talk about this for a second. We're at 130 feet, and we know that we've got 3 to 6 hours if we were running a 200% partial pressure of oxygen before mild symptoms start developing. Would it be a bad thing if you had 40% in that and started as an immediate ascent once you started breathing it? Would you have oxygen toxicity issues?
You shouldn't if you're going up.
Exactly. That's my exact point. So would your dive be safer if you used a higher partial pressure of oxygen for an emergency ascent to the surface if you had a catastrophic gas failure?
Maybe to give you more of a margin of error, I guess.
Absolutely. So my suggestion to you guys is if, and this is where I see a lot of divers have issues, and certainly there's a lot of different thoughts on this, right? So the overall thought I want you to get the idea out of this is that overall, let's see, I'm just going to put that as the main screen. There we go. That should be a little easy to see. The main thing I want you to get the opportunity out of this is, A, if you have a catastrophic gas failure, you're going to go to your pony bottle and you're going to end the dive and you're going to begin your ascent. B, in this process, that it's better to have at least some partial pressure of nitrox in that pony bottle than it is to have air. Nitrox means less nitrogen. Less nitrogen in the new breathing gas means a better flush of the nitrogen out of your system. Means a bigger safety margin and a safer ascent to the surface and a safer safety stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, part 3 of that. If we realize that it's going to take 3 hours before mild symptoms are going to start to develop if we're doing a 200%, well, the good news is 130 divided by 33 is 3.9 atmospheres plus 1 equals, let's see, so say 4 atmospheres minus 1 for the surface tension divided by 1.6 equals, means we're breathing 1.87 partial pressure. So the partial pressure at 40% at 130 feet is 1.87. Let's say 1.9. So you're still going to be below the 200% that they're talking here. So if I start breathing 180%, 190% oxygen, right? And I start immediate ascent at 33 feet per minute, in 1 minute, I'll have gone from 33 feet or 130 feet to 130 feet, right? Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden I've reduced that partial pressure, right? Considerably. In 1 more minute from that, I'll be at 70 feet. In 1 more minute, I'll be at 40 feet. So in 3 minutes, I'll be easily within a low enough partial pressure of oxygen that I will not have to worry about the oxygen toxicity hit of it, right? Mm-hmm. So I just want you guys to think about that. If it takes a long time, not a long time, but it takes time for it to get that partial pressure hit and of CNS, of the toxicity, why not use the highest partial pressure of oxygen that I possibly can carry? I can tell you, for example, I carry 60% in my pony bottle and in my deco bottles. If I had a catastrophic gas failure, I would immediately switch over to my 60%, and I would start begin my ascent immediately to get up to a safe distance. And 60%, I have to be below 70 or above 70 feet. So I would do an immediate ascent to 70 feet and then remain there as I decode out. But I want you to think about that for a moment. You've got more time than you think. Having a higher partial pressure will flush that nitrogen even faster than normal. You've got time to do that. And if you are running a pony bottle, make sure that if you have to start over to that pony bottle, that is the end of your dive. You're done for the day, and everything is ending there. So that's kind of the thing I want you guys. Now, this is not the book. I want you to be very clear on that. What I'm teaching you right now is certainly higher end into the deco theory, but it gives you the bigger picture and the more truth of really where we're at with oxygen toxicity and what that looks like. Now, other things to be aware of with oxygen toxicity, there are certain drugs out there. Antipsychotic drugs happen to be one that I happen to know, but it's probably the only one that I know that can increase your risk of having oxygen toxicity. Now, there are other drugs out there as well. Hypertension medication, high blood pressure medication, absolutely increase the odds of getting oxygen toxicity. Now, the story for you, I have a friend that was teaching cave diving, and they took a friend of their, a new student cave diving, and they were doing a 2,000 meter penetration through a cave as their final cave dive, right? And so they get around 1,000 meters into this cave, and the diver between them, the student, passed out, and they thought he had gone, that he had died, that he had, they couldn't tell if he had a pulse, but they kept the regulator in and kept it tight in and immediately turned the dive. But the problem is they're in a cave. So it took them a good 20 minutes to get them all the way out the cave. And they pulled him through the last restriction within 100 yards of the exit. And all of a sudden he came to. And he didn't remember passing out. He didn't remember being dragged through the cave for the 20 or 30 minutes that it was. He didn't remember any of this. What had happened is he'd gone into a full, he'd completely passed out, complete involuntary passing out from oxygen toxicity. So they started researching to say, okay, what the heck happened with this? And what they determined is that he had been taking an antipsychotic medication. And his determination was, well, I'm on the medication, so it's under control. And if it's under control, I don't have it. So probably not the best choice that you could possibly make as well on any of this. So overall, make sure that you're healthy for diving. Make sure you go for Don, Dallin, and Aaron. Make sure you guys and Jolene, make sure you go talk to Dwayne before you if you're having any concerns or issues or whatnot, and make sure that you are healthy and suitable for diving. Make sure that you're being straight up. Just if you're taking medication, let us know, let the doctor know, and make sure that you're cleared for diving before this. So another example, just to, kind of on a health note, there's also a new problem that they're discovering called immersion pulmonary edema. It was really discovered in the around 2000, but it wasn't really studied or noted in diving until around 2016, 2017 is really when the first papers were beginning to be read about it. We're still pretty in the dark about it as well. But what it is it has to do with diving in cold while you're hypertensive or have high blood pressure on those medications. Here's the story. So there's a diver and an instructor and an assistant instructor that were doing a twin set dive in a quarry in England. It was very cold. As they swam out to the buoy, to the downline, the diver that they were teaching complained of being severely out of breath. And they were very confused on this because it wasn't that hard to swim. They were doing a light swim. It's just a quarry. So, I mean, how big can a quarry really be, right? He finally indicated that he felt he was okay to begin his dive. They went ahead and went down the downline, got to 120 feet, did a short dive. They were all wearing twin sets. They began doing their ascent, and as they began their ascent, the student diver complained that he signaled himself to be out of gas. So immediately the instructor did exactly what he was supposed to do, and he put the diver on the long hose of the assistant instructor, who he knew to have plenty of gas. Now remember, they're diving twin sets, so they got a ton of gas. They came up a little farther. and got to their safety stop at 20 feet. And the diver complained that he was out of gas, but which is odd because the assistant instructor had plenty of gas. The instructor immediately took his long hose and started, because he knew he had plenty of gas, and gave it to the student. The student took the gas, but complained still of being out of gas, and began to do a panic ascent to the surface before the safety stop had completed. Once the instructor noticed this, he grabbed the student and held him down, kept the air in his mouth, and forced him to continue breathing, and got him calmed down. The student remained calm for about another minute and a half, almost 2 minutes, before the instructor noted that his eyes seemed to roll back into his head. They finished once they noticed this, that it seemed his student was going unconscious. They took him to the surface immediately, inflated his BC, and began rescue breathing until they could drag him to shore and began CPR. Unfortunately, the student passed away. In the study, what they determined was that the student had died of immersion pulmonary edema. He had not indicated that he had high blood pressure and was on high blood pressure medication, which had exacerbated the situation severely. What ends up happening with immersion pulmonary edema is that literally the easiest way to explain it is that the alveoli in your lung structure starts sweating and producing liquid instead of separating oxygen. The lungs literally fill up with fluid from within and cause a drowning effect. So it's very difficult for most medical examiners to determine the difference between it because it looks very much like drowning. So the signs and symptoms of that are out of feeling of out of air, continually panicking and complaining of being out of gas, not being able to breathe, shortness of breath, winded easily. And again, these situations tend to be exacerbated specifically in cold water diving. Not that any of us do that kind of stuff around here, but it's also exacerbated by high blood pressure and hypertensive medications as well. So kind of
is it better to get them to the surface sooner, or is it better to try to do your safety stop?
It would now remember, safety stop is optional. So at that point, you're much better off having somebody that you can get to the surface and begin something, CPR, high pressure, or putting a high pressure oxygen so they're able to breathe. Get them to the point where you're able to potentially evacuate the lungs if you need to. Get them to an EMT that knows what the hell they're doing. But you'd be much better off. It's like recompressing somebody underwater that is exhibiting signs and symptoms of DCS, right? By taking them back underwater when they're starting to exhibit signs of DCS, all you're doing is creating a potential secondary issue that's going to need CPR, but you can't do CPR underwater. So that's the thing to be aware of, is you're much better getting into the surface, getting to the point where there's plenty of air. They're not actually out of air. You're able to roll them on their side. You can potentially clear the lungs if you need to, and begin actual CPR and add them to air, get them to an EMT and get them to medical treatment immediately. Find Dwayne. That's my answer. Find Dwayne. Stab him with a needle right through the chest.
Put him on positive pressure ventilation.
There you go. Exactly. Find Dwayne or Don and let him trach him.
I don't think that either the trach or the needle decompression is going to help with the fluid in the lungs.
But I don't think so either. You got to put a breathing tube in and get him on positive pressure.
Exactly.
With
CPAP.
Yep. Exactly. That. I jest a lot, but absolutely that would be the best situation, is to certainly intubate them in such a way that you're able to add pressure to the lungs of actual air. So absolutely, you're on the right track. But just be aware overall that as we talk about this, that there's definitely a lot of things that happen with the lungs. So with oxygen toxicity, it looks a lot like a lot of other things, but the easiest way to remember oxygen toxicity signs and symptoms are convented. CON for convulsions, grand mal seizures, usually without warning, tunnel vision, or any other changes in your vision. Ringing in the ears doesn't help me because I always have ringing in the ears. Nausea, mild or severe, continuous or intermittent. Twitching, usually the facial muscles, but is the most frequent symptom. Irritability, and dizziness, vertigo, or disorientation. Now, what do you think the treatment for oxygen toxicity is?
That's a good question.
Put them on oxygen.
Exactly. It's kind of funny, but that's the exact right answer, is to put them on oxygen. So now, which of these signs and symptoms will you notice in somebody else? Dallin, what do you think?
So the signs and symptoms, like what we were talking about at the beginning, is the asking them where they're at on air, and if they come back saying that they're out of air, then you're gonna start to realize that they're suffering from that and having fluid built up.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Just like we were talking about.
How about you and I get on the dive boat? What signs and symptoms would you notice in me that potentially I could have oxygen toxicity, or signs that I've had a CNS hit?
So you're gonna have, like we were talking about, the irritation of the throat, the coughing.
Would you notice me having an irritation in my throat?
Well, no, but the coughing would kind of suggest that you were.
Sure, absolutely. But look at this list here for a second. Can you see my screen?
No. Wait. So are we? Yes. So the effects of oxygen on the diver. Is that the one I'm looking at?
Did it not change?
Ben, we're still on the first slide.
We
just see
see the diver. Yeah.
Oh, let me reshare. I don't know why it's like kicking over screens. How about now?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
There we go. So I'm sorry about that. So what signs and symptoms would you notice in somebody else? So if we're on a dive boat, which of these signs and symptoms would you notice in me?
So the kind of the tunnel vision, because you're gonna be acting a little dizzy. Not necessarily the ring in the ear, but the let's see, the twitching, dizziness, like I said, and then also the onsets of like a mild or grand mal seizure, because you're gonna start like feeling like you're gonna, like the dizziness comes into effect. You're gonna feel like you're gonna faint, and then the shaking and stuff like that within the body, you're gonna notice.
And which signs would you just specifically notice in yourself?
In myself, I would notice the tunnel vision, the ringing in the ears, and the facial muscles feeling twitchy.
Okay. Now, interestingly enough,
The dizziness.
who knows what the first and most honest sign of any dive malady really is?
Confusion.
Or pallor, somebody turns white. I don't know.
Even before that, Tom, what do you think? What's the first sign and symptom of an actual dive malady?
I'm going to say irritability. They're not going to be acting like themselves.
You're closing in on it. Dallin, what do you think? What's the first sign and symptom of a dive malady?
Confused.
I want to say I agree with the fact that you're going to notice that they're going to be confused because they're not going to be able to respond to the proper hand signals and everything that you're trying to ask them.
Okay. Aaron, what do you think?
I'd say altered mental status is the first thing.
You're closing in on it. Dwayne, you ever have a bodybuilder come in and forget to tell you about some of his signs and symptoms that might have been important?
By the way, is the person on the deck of the boat right now, or is the patient under the water? Are we looking at signs and symptoms under the water or on the deck?
We'll talk on the deck. On the deck. I would argue that the first and most important sign and symptom of a dive malady is denial. It's not just a river in Egypt anymore. So we have to be honest with ourselves through this process, and we have to avoid the number one casualty of any sickness or any illness, and that's denial, right? We don't have to be tough guys. In the diving process, we have to realize how you feel going in the water is how you should feel coming out of the water, right? If you notice something, I have a headache, I have joint pain, don't just shrug it off. That's a sign. That's your body trying to tell you something. It may not be a dive malady. It certainly might not be, but I would venture to guess that there's enough guys on here, and Jolene's probably seen this as well, where, are you sick? Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm going to work. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. Right?
Well, I know, but with denial, wouldn't you have to see something to be able to ask him those questions?
I would say you have to be able to identify it in yourself first. So interestingly enough, I had a chance when I went through a jet training, backseat jet training. We had to sit in the hyperbaric chamber and learn the feeling and signs and symptoms of hypoxia. It was interesting. We all sit in this chamber. We all had these little tables, and we had an oxygen mask right around our neck. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute so you can see me. So let's see. There we go. So we had this oxygen. It was right around our neck, and we were said to, when we felt the signs and symptoms of hypoxia, to stop what we were doing, put the oxygen mask on, and start breathing it. There's 10 Marines in this class. How many of the Marines do you think actually put the stupid mask on when they felt the signs and symptoms of hypoxia?
0.
0 is the exact right answer. So interestingly enough, as we went through this process, the idea was to learn a feeling of it, right? And so each one of us had a different thing. Like, for example, mine was I had a deck of cards. I was to peel off the first card, and they were videotaping this, which has made it even more fun. As they're videotaping this, you look at the card and say, 2 of diamonds, 3 of spades, 5 of hearts, whatever it was. And you have to say this, right? Another pair of guys had to play patty cake. And each person had a different skill that they had to do, right? And we had choices. There's another guy doing cards too. But anyway, I remember specifically going through and saying 2 of spades. And then the next thing I remember was the corpsman forcing my mask on me, pushing me back and pushing the purge button and making me breathe pure oxygen and waking up going, the hell are you doing, dude? Why are you on top of me? I didn't realize what was going on. So I started feeling the lightheadedness a little bit. And as I went back to the videotape, you can see exactly when it happens, because all of a sudden I go flush a little bit and I'm 2 of clubs, 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 2 of clubs. It wasn't the 2 of clubs. It was everything else but the 2 of clubs. But I locked into the last action. So the first sign and symptom of any of these really is denial. And so we have to, especially as divers doing what we're doing, we have to take that time to be aware of our physical and diagnose it within ourselves first. I actually saw a really interesting video. Jill Heinrich, she's a world famous diver, conservationist, ecologist, Women's Divers Hall of Fame, yada, 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 staff photographer for National Geographic, all this. About 15, 20 years ago, I think it was, she did a test where they lowered the partial pressure of oxygen on a rebreather, and they had her husband sitting there. They had pure oxygen, and within 2 minutes, they lowered him down to 0.11, so 11% oxygen, and you couldn't tell the difference. And he was supposed to stop everything when he got to the point where he was at too low a partial pressure and he could feel the effects of hypoxia. The first thing that you see where you could tell, he goes flush and his eyes roll back, and they're like, "Oh crap!" And they yanked the rebreather out of his mouth and put him on pure O. He took a hardcore hit, right? And by the way, at the beginning of the video, it says very clearly, "Do not try this; you will die." So this is the early days of really understanding this. So really, I want you guys to understand that you've got to be very hyper vigilant on how you feel going in your dives. You've got to make sure that that's how I feel coming up. That's how I feel coming out. That's how I feel sitting on the deck. Most accidents and most problems, oxygen toxicity, CNS toxicity, DCS, any of your embolisms, they won't happen usually immediately. Typically, most dive maladies will start forming somewhere between 2 and 15 minutes after you surface from the dive. So be aware. If things start going wrong, you need to be hyper vigilant and realize what that feels like, looks like, and is, so you can skip the whole first sign and symptom of a dive malady, which is denial, truthfully. So does that help a little bit?
You bet.
Cool. All right. Whoop. That is not the slide button I wanted to push. I pushed end. I hate having an end button. All right. So there's Aaron. I pushed the wrong button. There we go. Thank you very much. All right. And down. There we go. So quiz time. A lung rupture can occur with overpressurization in water as shallow as? Dallin, what do you think?
4 feet.
4 feet is exactly right. 1 psi for every 2 feet. The lung can rupture at an overpressurization of as little as 2 psi. Now, here's your question of the day, Dallin. So, 4 feet at the from 4 feet to 0 feet, I can have a lung rupture. Is that exactly the same truth if I was coming up from 150 feet to 146 feet?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Well, if we're going off the AGE, if you were coming up and you were to like not practicing correct breathing or anything like that, then I would say yes.
Okay, so let's think about that for a second. So if there's a 50% pressure change from 0 to 33 feet, and there's a 33% pressure change between 33 and 66 feet, a 25% pressure change between 66 and 99 feet. You see where I'm going with that?
Yes, the pressure is going to change, and
So
everything's going to expand. Oh, so no.
there you go. Good. Now, why? Now do you understand why?
Yeah, because everything's getting smaller as you're going down.
Yep. Your pressure gradation changes, and it's a gradient, not a linear line. It doesn't change 2 psi for every 2 feet all the way down to 1,000 feet, right?
Yeah.
The difference in change of pressure changes as you go down. I just want you to think about that for a minute. So a little bit of a trick question. Your answer was exactly right. You did a great job. Good job.
Okay.
But I just want you to think a little farther along on that line. So as you dive deeper, the narcotic effect of nitrogen gets, Dallin, what do you think?
Greater.
Greater is exactly right. All right. I'm done picking on Dallin for a minute. I will pick on somebody else. Which of the following statements concerning heat stroke is not true? Don, what do you think?
Depending on the phase, the skin is not necessarily hot.
Exactly. But we're looking for something else in this. When we get to the full stroke version of this.
Perspiration will also cease as well.
Exactly. And that's what we're really looking for, is the perspiration aspect of this. So not necessarily, but it could be. Yes, it's extremely serious condition. The pulse will absolutely become more rapid, but once it turns from heat stroke, into heat stroke, then it actually becomes you stop perspiring. Let's see. Oh, there we go. All right. Dwayne, how many pairs of sinuses do you have?
You have 4.
Good job. That's exactly right. Where are they located?
You have your ethmoids, you have your frontal sinuses, you have, I don't know where they all are.
Cheeks and forehead, right?
Yeah.
There you go. You popped up with a new term that I hadn't heard before. All right. Let's see. What is going on here? There's the sinuses. There we go. Oh, look. Heat stroke. There's sinuses. There we go. All right. Dawn, which of the following is not a sign and symptom of decompression sickness?
Let's see. I'm going to go with cyanosis on this one.
That is exactly right. Good job. Hypothermia means a lower than normal. Aaron, what do you think?
Body core temperature.
Body core temperature is exactly right. All right. I'm just going to start using the arrow. There we go. A physiological condition called squeeze occurs when? Aaron, what do you think?
I know we talked about this on another presentation. I went and looked it up, and it's when the pressure outside is more than inside, so it squeezes it.
Exactly. Good job. All right. Permanent hearing loss. This one is for Jolene. We haven't picked on Jolene for a while. Permanent hearing loss, vertigo, and ringing in the ears are most likely a result of a ruptured
B, round or oval window.
Absolutely. Dwayne, can you explain that just a little bit for us?
Well, the round window and the oval windows are part of your inner ear, and you rupture those, and then you can't hear because right, it's not just the eardrum, so it's actually connecting to the hammer and the stapes or whatever it's called.
Good job. That's a great explanation. I appreciate you on that. Let's see. Da-da-da. There we go. All right. The primary symptom of ear squeeze in its initial phases is what, Dwayne?
Pressure that will progress to severe pain if equalization is not completed. A
is exactly right. There are several overexpansion injuries caused by air expanding the lungs beyond their capacity that you should be aware of, so that you can avoid them while diving. These are, Dallin, what do you think?
Let's see. Okay, so C, air embolism, mediastinal, I can't even say that one.
Mediastinal.
And then, yep, so C.
Yep, mediastinal emphysema, subcutaneous emphysema, and pneumothorax. So there we go. And what was the key word in this sentence that led you to that belief?
The expansion of the lungs.
Yep.
Or air. Yeah, sorry, air.
Expanding the lungs. Yep.
Yep.
Good job. That's exactly what you said. Exactly what I was looking for. All right. If you have difficulty equalizing pressure in your ears or sinuses while ascending, you should. Aaron, what do you think?
Ascend until the pressure is relieved and then attempt equalization. D.
Yep. Even if a diver suffers decompression sickness in a remote location, you should never. Jolene, you got this one down.
D, recompress underwater.
Exactly. Now the key in this is suffers from decompression sickness. Right. I want to really kind of point that out because we talked about this a little bit earlier, and you guys questioned when I said, "Hey, I blew my deco stop, and I went ahead and redescended." I didn't have decompression sickness. I just popped the surface, and I knew where I was at. There was no issues for me having DCS, so I went ahead and completed my decompression obligation. It was severe enough that I needed to go down, but I wasn't symptomatic. My deco stop was at 20 feet, so I wasn't that far above my deco stop, but I needed to pop down so that I didn't go in and have and acquire decompression sickness. So that's really our key. Is we don't recompress underwater when they're exhibiting signs of decompression sickness. So just to be really clear. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. All right. This is my favorite sentence in the world, by the way. Hypoxic hypoxia is by far the most common form of hypoxia. That just, it's a lot of hypoxic in there. This condition is when, Don, what do you think?
When the partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood is too low.
That's exactly right. Good job. All right. And let's follow up that question. When oxygen pressure in the body drops below what partial pressure of 1.7 or 0.17, mild symptoms of hypoxia occur. Blackout and death may occur if it drops below. Don, what do you think?
Let's see. D, 0.10 ATA.
D is exactly right. A possible source of contaminated air in scuba cylinders is, what do you think, Dallin? Let's pick on you again.
Okay, hold on. So this one is A, all the answers are correct.
That is exactly right. All right. Aaron, are you ready to talk to us a little about Mr. J.S. Haldane?
What's that?
Are you ready to talk to us about decompression theory?
I didn't know I was supposed to.
Oh, okay. Not a worry. You were on schedule for that, but talk about that later. Not a big deal. So let's talk about decompression theory. Who needs a quick drink of water? Anybody?
I could take one.
Okay.
I could too.
All right.
Just one.
Yeah. Take 2 minutes and get you a drink of water. And
Do you mind grabbing me one, hon? Do you mind grabbing me one, please? Oh.
Okay.
are you guys all seeing decompression theory history?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Are we all back?
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Welcome back to part 2 of night 3. I'm just kidding. All right. Decompression theory is actually kind of interesting. And basically what we're talking about here is how partial pressures of nitrogen and gases prefuse and defuse from the tissues. That's really all we're studying here, right? We're getting how those high partial pressures that we've been talking about go into the bloodstream, go into the tissue, what happens in different tissues, and then how they, on ascension, how they come back out of the tissues. That's all we're talking about. It's not rocket science, truthfully. We make it sound a lot more bigger and scary when we start talking about Workman's critical difference, and we start talking about other things like that of J.S. Haldane. J.S. Haldane was an interesting guy, though. He worked for the British Admiralty in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and they were doing scientific studies on divers at this time. And so in 1908, he actually published his first paper on decompression theory. And what he theorized is that there was basically 5 tissue compartments in the body, and that the half time, the time it took for them to fully saturate by 50% varied. And his first decompression model said that the first tissue, the fastest tissue compartment, half time was 5 minutes. The second tissue compartment was about 10 minutes. The third was about 20 minutes. The fourth was about 40 minutes, and the fifth one was about 75 minutes. So it was interesting. He was starting to notice a model that was not purely linear, but it was slightly, at that point, exponential, right? And this time to get the T value or get to the M value of a cell, right? The N value actually came in later in the 50s, but we're still talking about the basic idea of the M value, the maximum amount of gas or nitrogen that a blood cell can hold, or not as blood cell, but a cell within the tissue compartments will hold, right? So he, in doing this, it was interesting that they had a lot of accidents with decompression sickness. And luckily, after he published this, he was able to reduce the amount of accidents and deaths were due to diving by 50% in his first set of tables. So huge victory, right? Worked for Britain. The first place we started noticing really decompression sickness overall was as they were taking people down in caissons. And as they were taking down these caissons to work on the Brooklyn Bridge, for example, that's where the caisson disease comes from. What they did notice is as people would come up, they'd bring them up after working for 12 hours at 150 feet, 200 feet. They after about 15, 20 minutes, they'd start doubling over in pain. And as they doubled over in pain, they would literally call it the bends. They were getting sick and get the bends. They also noticed that they could put their workers back in the belt and send them back down, and all the symptoms would subside. So that's literally how they're studying this stuff. They're saying, wait a minute, we bring people up to the surface, they get sick. We send them back down, they get well. Interesting. So he's putting this model together, and he says there's got to be a mathematical formula that we can simply say that I can go this deep for this long, and this is when symptoms will start to occur. And what he determined was that it had to be a 2-to-1 difference in ratio. Now, this is before they were really understanding the idea of the partial pressures of nitrogen and oxygen and adding helium and whatnot. So he was just getting the idea that the pressure point had to be twice that of the surface. So he's on the right path, and he's getting the idea of what partial pressures are, but he's only halfway there. And they kept this, and he reverted his model a few times. And interestingly enough, the J.S. Haldane model for decompression is still the one, still the basis of the models we use today. That the 2-to-1 ratio is the basic idea. So Haldane basically came up with this 2-to-1 ratio. Now, it wasn't so much later that Robert Workman came in, and Robert Workman reworked the model. And Workman basically said, wait a minute, I think you're almost there, you're close, but I think you're missing something. So let's study this a little bit more deeply. It's kind of like when we talk about, I talk in stress and rescue, that make sure you step back from the problem and look at all the pieces of the puzzle, right? And so Workman said, wait a minute, I think you're almost there. What if we started looking at the gas itself and breaking down that gas? And let's look at the nitrogen, because I think it's the nitrogen that's causing the issue. Well, he studied it, and it turned out he was right. So what he determined was Workman's critical difference came up, and he said when we get to 2 times the partial pressure of nitrogen is when we have to be concerned that we can start getting into a decompression issue, and we might have to need a decompression obligation. So when we get to 2 times the partial pressure of nitrogen, or 33 feet, and you might notice that in the slide here, it talks about the workman's critical difference was 10 meters or 33 feet, which is 2 times 1.58 bar. So my question to you, Dallin, if we're breathing 79% nitrogen at the surface, what is the partial pressure of nitrogen at 33 feet?
At 33 feet? Let's see.
You had it.
So it's 1.58.
Now, do you notice a coincidence on this screen that in the Workman's critical difference? Do you see that right there?
What am I looking at?
If you're looking at the screen, Workman's critical difference says that when the partial pressure gets to 1.58, that becomes the issue. The issue point is that it happens to be set to 1.58, and 1.58 happens to be 2 times nitrogen. You notice the correlation there?
That you're taking on 2 times the amount of gas?
Exactly. When you get to the point where you're twice the amount of nitrogen, that's when Workman's critical difference kicks in.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, if I'm breathing 40% nitrox, which means I'm breathing 60% nitrogen instead, does that mean that I can go deeper before I get to the critical difference?
Yes.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. Good job. I'm going to pick on you more because I want you to ace nitrox. So good job. So that's what Haldane said. Is he's like, wait a minute. Or Workman came in and said, he says, wait a minute. I think we're almost there, but we can't take on and deal with just the partial pressure of the atmospheric pressure and look at everything. We need to look at what the actual process is. Now, interestingly enough, later on, as we get a little deeper into it, we find out that Workman was actually almost there and not quite correct. It has been later proven incorrect. But for where you guys are at in diving, it's a perfect analogy. It keeps you safe. That 2 times partial pressure of nitrogen is the point where we should do a safety stop. Is the point where a dive is considered a dive, right? So that's the basic idea. So what we're dealing with in this is we're dealing with what's called the M value, and the M value, stands for maximum. So for the given ambient pressure, an M value is defined as the maximum value of the inert gas, or the pressure, the absolute pressure that the hypothetical tissue compartment can tolerate without presenting overt symptoms of decompression sickness. So basically, if you think about it, our tissues have cells within them, right? And each one of those cells is like a balloon. Tracking with me so far, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're saying with this is the M value is the largest point I can blow this balloon up before it pops. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so M value is 100% of the point where before the balloon pops. So what we're doing is we're deciding where we want to be on the M value scale. So we're making sure to keep that balloon lower on the pressure side so it's not getting to the point where it might pop. That's what a safety stop does, is it allows you to get to a point where you're able to, that balloon is now filled all with nitrogen. We're allowing that balloon to very slowly reduce the size of it so that when I come to the surface, it doesn't pop. So think about it like this, and add track with me for a moment. Remember, if we take a 1 cubic foot balloon of air, of gas at 33 feet, and we bring it to the surface, how big is it, Jolene?
Double.
2 cubic feet, right?
Yeah.
Same thing happens. Same basic idea happens with your cells, and this nitrogen that is in the fast and slow tissue. If I'm at 33 feet and I'm at 80% M value, I've got 80% nitrogen in that cell, and I suddenly come to the surface, what's going to happen to that cell?
It's going to get bigger.
It is, absolutely. And it most likely it's going to pop. It's going to get, it's going to go past that 100% level, and it's going to pop. Now, it doesn't actually pop, if you will, but what it does is it lets that nitrogen out faster than what we want. Now, much like a Coke bottle, if we take a Coke bottle, we shake the crap out of it, it makes those bubbles. Same basic idea. And if we let the cap off, take the cap off all of a sudden, all that gas comes out really fast. If we take it off really slowly, that's a slow ascent and a safety stop, it lets it out into smaller bubbles. Excuse me for 1 second here. There we go. Sorry. At this time of the evening, my the Alexa starts turning the lights down slowly, and so my office lights were almost off. So sorry about that. So that's basically what the M value represents: is the size, the maximum amount of limit on the cells they will get before bad stuff happens, and we turn that nitrogen in the cells of our tissue compartments into bubbles that are too large for us, our body, to manage, and that's when the DCS starts to happen. So now what ends up happening with pressurization, it works on this, like on this graph. So we have our safety margin, or M value line. This is where 100% of the gas value would be on our ascent. And so as we stair step here, this is what a slow ascent would look like. We're slowly letting the gas out as we come up. So we're staying away from the M value line. Now, what your dive computer will do is it will allow you to push yourself away from that M value line based upon the conservativeness of your profile. So if you're running a Perdix, for example, you can run it on very conservative or very not very conservative, right? You're running a Sunto, same thing. Most computers will have 3 different values: high, low, and high, medium, and low conservativeness. On the Garmin or on the Shearwater, you can actually set your gradient factor. And what the gradient factor basically says is that I'm going to set my personal standards of how I want to approach the M value line. Now, if you're interested in learning more about the M value line and the gradient factors and how DECO really works, there's another great course I would encourage, Decompression Procedures. We really go into how to set that gradient factor and how to figure that gradient factor out for you to make your dives feel better and more comfortable for you. But that's definitely heading towards the edge of diving, and we're starting to do those bigger, longer dives. That's the good stuff to know. If you're staying recreational and 60 foot is where you want to be, it's probably not for you. So, but overall, that gives you the idea. This is what we're studying when we're talking about decompression models and how decompression works, and what's happening to the nitrogen in our system. What we're really talking about is the M value and how much nitrogen we're allowing to go into each cell. Dallin, you still tracking with me?
Yes.
Good. Restate what I just told you and help me understand it from your point of view.
So aside from when you were talking about with the decompression class, it's the absorption and the expulsion of the nitrogen from the cells.
Exactly. What is my M value line really representing? Tell me in your words.
So the M value is really representing where your body is going to be able to tolerate the nitrogen or other gases within your body without causing issues.
Exactly. So the M value represents, of course, the maximum value of, or the maximum amount of nitrogen a cell compartment can hold, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure you're tracking with me. So the evolution of M values really continued down with Haldane and his decompression models from the basic 5 compartments to Workman's model contained 9 compartments with half times ranging from 5 minutes to 240 minutes. So you can see really quickly that as we move from 1908 with Haldane and having 5 basic compartments that we're looking at to Workman saying, wait a minute, dude, we've got to be more granular on this and a lot more accurate. So just like trucks, I don't know if any of you remember having a 1980s truck, the biggest thing you get was a 4-speed, and Aaron and I and Dwayne and Jolene we're all old enough to remember when the 5-speed came out. We were like, holy cow, a 5-speed, sweet. And then all of a sudden 7 speeds, and now my truck has a 10-speed transmission. It's like, holy cow. Same basic idea. As the manufacturers came along, they were able to realize that you could get more granular with stuff, be more accurate, and increase your gas mileage and be more efficient in your engine use. Well, Workman came along and said the same basic idea. He said, wait a minute, stop here, dude. I see that you're at 5, but I think we can be more accurate and we can be a little bit more efficient. We break this into smaller bites and we take it to 9 compartments. Now, while Workman was doing his research with the Naval Experimental Diving Unit, there was another famous professor, Albert Bullman. Has anybody heard that last name before, Bullman? Don, have you heard that name before?
Sorry, I was cleaning up a mess. What was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. So we're talking about decompression models. Workman was working with NEDU, Naval Experimental Diving Unit, and then Professor Bullman was conducting research in Switzerland. Have we heard that name before, Bullman?
Yeah, that's the same name that we gave the decompression tables that we use on like the Garmin's, and I think it's like the preferred algorithm for most decompression procedures.
Exactly. So Bullman was a Swiss scientist in a hospital, and he developed two very popular models that were widely distributed through the diving community. His model is different from Workman in that they contain even more compartments. So just like every Swiss and German out there, he looked at it and said, wait a minute, we don't need to measure by the minute. We can measure by the second. In fact, we can measure by the half second or the nanosecond. So they got into it even more granularly to make it even safer. And so Bullman was the first one to release and say, wait a minute, I know we're at 9 tissue compartments. We started with 5, but I think we've got 16. So he released his first algorithm, which was the ZHL16, the Z16 compartment ratio, right? The Z16 algorithm. And I forget what the ZH stood for. It's the Z, and I forget what the H stands for, to be honest with you. But it was the 16 compartments, right? And they ranged from 4 minutes to 635 minutes in half times. That was the 50% point that it took to change a tissue compartment from fully saturated to half saturated. Now, one of the things you guys might notice on the dive tables, it takes how much time to change you from to a new dive day. How long is a time between dives do you become a new dive day? Dallin, how many hours?
Would that be 12 hours?
That would be exactly 12 hours. Good job. Now, as you look at this, Dallin, how long is 635 minutes?
1 second.
Would it be 10 hours and 35 minutes?
Yes.
There you go. Easy math, right?
Yeah.
Dallin, how easy would it be for you if I told you that you had to remember your new dive day started at 10 hours and 35 minutes? Would that be an easy number to remember?
No.
No. Would 12 hours be a little easier?
Yes, because then it also gives you a safety window of an extra.
I love it. Good job, Dallin. You beat me to the punch. That was exactly where I was going. Is they like it for 2 reasons. A, it's an easy number to remember. We can all remember 12 hours, right? 12 and 24 hours are simple numbers to remember. but it also gave them the advantage of adding a bit of a safety window to that point. So good job, Dallin. You beat me to the punch. I am very proud of you right now. So that's really what he did is he came up with this. Now, interestingly enough, he came out with the Z16 rhythm algorithm first. Then he released the A version of it, where he tinkered and he adjusted the half times a little bit more. And then he tinkered with it again and he adjusted the half times again. And that was the B version. We're currently on the C version. Now, the good news is the C version has been out for about 15 years now. So, and there's no D version on the horizon anytime soon. And while they're always testing and working at the Naval Experimental Diving Unit down in Florida, they're an amazing bunch of guys and they're always experimenting. Right now, the 16C algorithm is the bomb diggity and everybody uses it, right? There are the variable bubble model, the VBM model, but for most diving, you'll find that the algorithm 16C is the preferred model used. Now, interestingly enough, when he got to the C, Bullman, being a tinkerer, he said, wait a minute, I think we can get more accurate. So he actually took the first two compartments, compartment 1, and he split it into compartment 1A and 1B. So even though we say that the Bullman algorithm 16C is 16 compartments, truthfully, it's 17. So there's your trivia fact for the day. If you ever want to stump a technical diver, ask him technically how many compartments are in the 16C algorithm. He will tell you 16 and he will be wrong. So there's your fun way to piss off a technical diver. Tell him he's wrong. So as we're going through this, we start realizing that Henry's law comes into effect here. And Henry's law is talks about how gas dissolves in a liquid. Okay, and how a partial pressure of gas dissolves in a liquid. Now, there's one part in here that's not in your book that is part of the law that I would like to at least touch on so that you guys get the idea. Is it says that the amount of gas which dissolves in a liquid is proportional to the partial pressure of the gas, right? The part that they're missing in this is the temperature. So as the temperature gets colder, it dissolves more quickly. So, and Henry, in his original hypothesis of this, mentions the temperature as well. So I want you guys to be aware that Henry's law talks not only about the partial pressure and the agitation or how fast it's happening. So if I'm breathing faster, will I uptake nitrogen faster? Jolene. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Dwayne's on the phone with the patient. Yes, I think so.
Absolutely. As agitation, right? You're gonna mix ice cream faster if the ice cream maker is moving faster, right? Same thing with the blood, right? You're gonna absolutely agitate and uptake nitrogen faster if your heart is pumping faster. But also be aware you're gonna uptake nitrogen faster if you're cold. So just be aware of that. And I like to make sure we talk about that briefly. So what we're talking about in the partial pressure and the decompression models is what we're really talking about is how the gas gets from our breathing it through the alveoli into the bloodstream and into our tissues and how it comes back out again. That's all we're really talking about. We're using a lot of complicated terms here that sound big, simple enough. If you breathe fast, you'll put nitrogen in your system faster. If you go down deeper, the partial pressure of nitrogen is higher, you put more nitrogen into your system. And if the water is cold, nitrogen plays in your system faster. Now, the other thing to be aware of is our bodies are designed to be in equilibrium. We talked about this on night 1 as well. So our bodies want to be equal with the nitrogen around us. So if we're at a deeper depth where the nitrogen is 158%, our body says, wait, the gas we're breathing is 158%. We want to be 150%. Our body will definitely follow the flow of the peer pressure of whatever's around us, right? So the peer pressure around us is that we're saying it's a higher partial pressure. So our body wants to be that too. That's all we're talking about. Does that make it sound a little more simple for you, Dallin?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure
I'm sorry. I got a little lost on that.
Okay. So what we're talking about is Henry's law. And Henry's law just talks about the partial pressure is going to be equal to what we're breathing, that it's going to go into our tissues. So our body wants to have the equal pressure of whatever we're breathing and our cell structure as well, and our tissues. Our tissue being like our fat, our bone, our brainstem, our muscle, our sinew, everything around us. That's what it's trying to tell us. So as we go deeper, Henry's law basically says that as we go deeper, the partial pressure will dissolve in the liquid and go and perfuse into the tissue. It'll go into the tissue. That's all we're saying. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Now, just the things to be aware of is that it has to also do that it'll increase with the agitation, so breathing rate, and it'll increase with as it gets colder as well. So it goes faster when we breathe faster, and it happens faster when we're cold.
Okay, got it.
Cool, easy enough. So inert, hold on a sec. Alexa, working on 100%. There we go. She turned my lights off again. Dirty booger. All right, so inert gas elimination. So not every bubble causes problems. So divers often are monitored with a Doppler ultrasound device to test the size of the bubbles in their gas in the bloodstream, right? And it's commonly detected that there's low-grade bubbles, even though there's no symptoms of decompression. Bubbles still exist that do not cause problems. Now, these bubbles, in your reading material, they talk about silent bubbles, but the first points of bubbles that we start seeing in our bloodstream are actually bubble seeds. So they haven't quite turned into bubbles yet, but they're getting ready to head that point and they're getting ready to combine. So bubble seeds are the first point. Silent bubbles is the next step. Now, the good news is that the bubbles are small enough. That's okay. Not a problem. They're doing their thing. They're going through the system. The bloodstream saying, it's good. Don't worry about it. No problem. Now, the problem is when they get to be too big and these and they get to the free flow and free phase of gas where they become large enough to start blocking things. When those bubbles are large enough, they become problems. And that's when we start getting into DCS. Now, Dallin, did I give you DCS or AGE? I thought I gave you DCS.
DCS, decompression sickness. Yes.
Perfect. Are you prepared to? This is a perfect segue to start talking about DCS. Are you ready?
Yeah. Yes, I finally got it cleared up to what I was confused on.
Awesome. I'm going to change the screen over to you. If you'd like to turn your camera on so we can see your happy face.
What?
We'd love to hear about DCS.
Okay.
There he is. North Face and everything. It's my favorite jacket.
Okay, so DCS being the intake of your gases as you're descending and going to a higher atmospheric pressure. But with DCS, as you're ascending with your effects of cold and all that stuff, your body's absorbing nitrogen within your tissue. And the biggest thing that I was having issues with was trying to figure out, because when I was trying to explain DCS, I was going into also putting in AGE into it. But my biggest thing that I had to figure out was instead of it being about oxygen within the lungs, it's the nitrogen within the tissues. And so each one, and the exhaling of breath. Anyway, so I finally got it cleared up. So with the gases of nitrogen or helium and all that stuff, if you're diving with nitrox, but mostly with nitrogen as you're descending, if you're going up, if you're ascending and your body's not really, if you're ascending too quickly and you're not giving your body enough time to allow the nitrogen to escape through the tissue into your blood system and out with exhalation, then you're, like we were just talking about with the seething bubbles and the silent bubbles, those are starting to occur. But if your nitrogen isn't escaping into your bloodstream quick enough and being released, then those bubbles are escaping in your gas into your tissue. And so the first symptom that you're going to find when you're dealing with decompression sickness is itchy skin. And then, so you want to get out of that situation, but along with everything else, you don't want to descend again to decompress. In fact, then you want to stop. Like if you're going from a really deep depth, other than your 15-foot safety stop, you're also going to add in a second safety stop or your first safety stop a lot deeper. So that way you can give it more time to escape. And then other symptoms that are going to occur later that you're going to find is once you get to the surface, you're gonna find fatigue. You're gonna end up feeling pain in your joints, and well, aside from itching. And once you get up and onto the boat and you are aware of this, you want to get to a decompression chamber quickly. And that's, yeah.
You got it. You guys, so you got the basic idea. So basically, simply enough, is as we ascend in the water column, the partial pressure will have to reduce of the nitrogen, right? So I'll take you off the screen again. We'll go back over. I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment and go back over to me. There we go. So basically, as you're ascending the water column, we know that we built up a higher partial pressure of nitrogen into our tissues, right? And theoretically, we have 16, 17 tissues, tissue compartments from fast to slow. Fast being able to let the partial pressure of that nitrogen out very quickly. Slow being it takes a lot of time, right? Like our fat. Our fat is our slowest tissue. Its halftime is 635 minutes. Our fast tissues, like our brain, it only takes 5 minutes for our halftime of that. So as the partial pressure of that nitrogen is coming out, it comes out in the form of bubbles and bubble seeds to silent bubbles. Now, if we come up too quickly, just like shaking that Coke bottle and letting the gas and the bubbles come out, if we take that cap off really quickly, crap goes everywhere. Well, if crap goes everywhere as it's coming out of our tissue into our bloodstream, bad stuff happens, such as level 1 of the bends, like Dallin mentioned, which is the skin bends. You'll see itchy, rash, things like that. Level 2 is where bubbles get large enough that they start getting trapped in the joints, so joint pain, dizziness, vertigo, nausea, a narrowing of vision. What's happening is you're getting blood bubbles large enough into the brain or into the joints that are causing issue. Soreness of the body and the muscles as well. Definitely signs and symptoms of DCS. Now, one of the things, the reasons you're getting those signs and symptoms of muscle soreness, for example, is you're getting bubbles that are large enough that the white blood cells in your body that are used to fighting things off, they're going around, they see something that's not supposed to be there, and they go to war. They're like, and as Don and I will both tell you, that war is not good for anybody, right? War, what's it good for, right? Nothing. I can't remember who sang that song, but either way, we realize that if there's a little war going on in our body, that bad things are happening and we're going to be sore doing that. And finally, DCS, the bubbles can be large enough where they start blocking major things. Blood flow to our arm, blood flow to our brain in different spots. Just like an AGE, an arterial gas embolism, it works very much the same at that final point. So that's what we're basically trying to tell you with DCS. Good job, Dallin. Do you think you have a better understanding of DCS now?
Yes.
Good. What was the most interesting thing you learned about DCS going through this?
So I've always had the concept of DCS. It's just when we were talking about the AGE, I couldn't get the decipher and split it apart and take it away as far as like being completely different from oxygen and nitrogen.
Gotcha. Well, cool.
So it was great to learn the difference.
Good. Well, here's to hoping that none of you see either. That none of us ever have to deal with any type of arterial gas embolism, subcutaneous emphysema, any of that, or have come up with a DCS. So that's my hope for all of us. I have got a lot of dives under my belt and done a lot of diving myself with other people as well, and I have yet to see an honest to goodness DCS. I can tell you, I honestly, if I were to really evaluate myself, I would probably have, and most people here would probably realize it or not, have probably had mild symptoms and presented with very mild cases of DCS. I have come out of the water sore or tired. And that is absolutely a sign and symptom of a mild case of DCS. So if you're coming out of the water tired, relax. Take your time. As you do your safety stops, don't be afraid to spend a little extra time at safety stops, and don't be afraid to do a little body decompression. We talked about that lightly yesterday. So good job, guys. All right. Go back to sharing screen. We'll continue down our path. There we go. All right. So we talked about our silent bubbles. Page down. So The inert gas elimination, not every bubble causes problems. Most of them are called silent bubbles or bubble seeds occur. So the gas contained in the bubbles is said to exist in a free phase as compared to gas dissolved in the tissue. Dang it. Let's see, figure out where it was. I keep hitting the wrong button on my keyboard here, so I apologize. Let's see, there we go. All right. So the trouble with bubble seeds is that even though they may start be stable at the surface, they may be excited into growth with the increase and subsequent decrease in pressure while diving. On descent, the inert gas pressure increases in the body tissues, and it's considered to be called loading. So you're loading up the tissues with nitrogen. So you have to unload those tissues as you come back up. So creating an environment that can promote bubble growth. Did I just do that again? Okay, no, I didn't. Let's see. I did. I keep hitting page all the way down. So when these bubbles form, it generally has an internal pressure somewhat higher than the inert gas and tension. What we're basically saying is, as you get higher in the water column, as you ascend, these bubbles will grow in size. So you want to give yourself plenty of time to let them come out as small bubbles rather than come up too quickly and allow them to become big bubbles. We talked about that too. All right. So this is what the desaturation model actually looks like. Do you guys all see my excessively complex chart here?
Yes.
Okay. So this is what the actual algorithms look like in half times. And it's interesting to look at these. If you ever get a chance, or if you want this table, let me know. I'll happily send it over to you. This is the current table, a Bowman 16C that we came out with. And it was published officially in 1990. It didn't become standard until about 1995. So it's interesting to take a look at this. And this is what his definition, and he says that the halftime of each cell compartment is. So the first compartment is 106 minutes, 97, 83, 73, 66. And this is the slope, the percentage of pressure variance of change of the cell. So it's interesting to take a look at that and look what the half times are overall. So once you start understanding these, you're able to get a better idea of where the half-time slope is and what's actually happening at different depths. So for example, if you're at 50 feet, you start realizing that most of your tissues compartments are still on gassing. Many of your tissue compartments are off gassing. So it's interesting to figure out where in the water column you are. So it's a fun chart to look over, but you start realizing that your tissues will, compartments will on gas at different paces at different points in the water column. And at different parts of the water column, some compartments can be off gassing and some can be off gassing all at the same time. So for example, if we did a 130-foot dive and we got to the point where our tissues had gotten all to a 50% saturation point, if we come up to 60 feet, what we'll find is that that the first 5 slowest tissue compartments are still on gassing. The next 10 tissue compartments are off gassing at 60 feet. So it's interesting to note that and kind of get an idea what's on gassing and what's off gassing all at the same time. So let's continue down the path. So the U.S. Navy dive tables, the history basically is that the U.S. Navy in the 50s decided that they needed to come up with an accurate model so that they could take the divers down and they could do something. And so what they did is they came to they created the Naval Experimental Diving Unit. They got together with Robert Bowman and J.S. Haldane, and they said, I'm sorry, Robert Workman, not Haldane, but Workman. And they said, we need to figure out a way, how long we can send our divers down to do something. And they came back and they said, wait a minute, okay, that's great. Let's define something. And they said, okay, well, we need them to be able to accomplish a task. And so what the Navy determined is we need them to be able to go down and accomplish a task. And the minimum amount of time that they need down there, the very basic minimum is 5 minutes. So they said, okay, let's pull that up. And what about if you did it for 10 minutes? If you stayed down for 10 minutes, what would that look like? They said, okay, perfect. And what's the deepest you can go for 10 minutes? And so they decided for 10 minutes that they could send a diver down to 140 feet. Now, Dallin, you've looked at the dive tables, hopefully. Have you ever seen 140 feet on the dive tables anywhere?
No, But
No?
aren't those set for open water?
Yeah, we're talking with the non-decompression limits. They wanted to be able to create a table for non-decompression limits.
Oh, yes, I have.
You've seen 140 feet on the SSI dive table?
I think so. Hold on, let me go grab it.
Sure, absolutely. How about you, Jolene? You've looked at the dive tables once or twice. Have you ever seen 140 feet on the dive table? I think you're muted.
I'm gonna say I don't think so.
How about you, Don?
Well, yeah, because I'm looking at it here. It goes to, well, does it go to 205?
What's the max?
I believe that I've seen one go down to 100 and maybe one that went down to 130 feet, but I'm pretty sure that's about where they stop.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine. It's 130.
Okay, there you go. And what's the longest time you can stay down at 130 feet?
Is it 10 minutes?
You sure?
No, I'm not positive, but I'm making it a solid try.
You're close. I'll give you a hit. You're close.
5 minutes and 42 seconds.
5 minutes. Dallin, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm just trying to find my table.
So perfect. Well, I'll give you the answer. The answer on the SSI dive tables is 5 minutes at 130 feet.
Yep, I see it.
Now, Dallin, you've hung around with guys before, right?
What's that?
You've hung around with guys before, right?
Yeah.
Are guys always the smartest things on 2 feet?
Nope.
Okay, there we go. So why do you think that the Navy said 130 feet or 140 feet for 10 minutes, but the dive table we're looking at says 130 feet for 5 minutes? Why is there a variance between those two?
Is that going to be because guys breathe heavier?
Nope, you already called it. I already gave you the answer.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear it.
Are guys the smartest thing on 2 feet?
Oh, gotcha. No. Okay.
So for the average guy, Dallin, if I tell you you can go to 130 feet, what does that mean for the average guy?
That he's going to try it?
He's gonna surpass that, right?
Yep.
And if I tell you to stay in the where's your favorite place to go, Dallin? Your favorite place in the world?
The Cayman Islands.
If I told you you could only spend 5 minutes on the beach, honestly, would you stay only 5 minutes on the beach?
No.
Okay. There's your answer to the question. Why it's 5 minutes. They said it was 10 minutes and 140 feet. Why they pulled it back? Because they realized very quickly that the average guy was going to, if 130 feet was good, 140 feet must be better. And if 5 minutes was good, 10 minutes must be better. Right?
Yeah.
So it's of note to notice in the dive tables that we built up, that we used through the NOAA and from the Navy dive tables, that we build a safety margin into it. It's intentional. We want to make sure you're safe. But we also realize that these dive tables were written for the 19-year-old Navy guy that just got out of Navy sea camp and has been running 5 miles a day. So how you guys process nitrogen is different than how they do. So they want to make sure they build a safety margin into that. So the intended use of this is basically to understand that we built a safety margin, but we want to make sure we build these to the lowest common denominator to make sure everybody's safe. Now, Doppler came along and they did the research on this, and they came across and said, wait a minute, you're not far off. Make sure you have that safety margin in there as well. The limitations of this, making sure that you're staying outside of a decompression obligation. Now, along the lines, at some point in the 70s, we finally came up and we said, wait a minute, I bet you there's a computerized way that we can start measuring this where we don't have to suddenly say, I'm going to dive for this long, for this deep, for this long. As you look at the dive tables, they're basically designed for a direct descent to whatever depth, to stay at that depth perfectly for a specific amount of time, and then directly ascend. But all of us here have at least one dive on our belt, and we realize that that's not capable of doing it. So basically, the history of the dive computers is in the late 60s, they theorized that there's a way to measure this, and the military got involved. And they said, we build a system, something that we can put on our combat divers so that they are able to have more bottom time but remain safe. Because it doesn't do us a darn bit of good if our Navy SEALs pop the surface at the beach, start running down to kill the enemy and topple over dead from DCS. That would be bad, right? So what they did is they said, let's build a dive computer. So the first dive computers are actually built by Scripps Institute in combination with the Navy, and were classified highly top secret. We didn't want our secrets to get out. Eventually, the technology, the civilians side got involved, and they started building better and better and better dive computers. So that's the overall intended history of the dive computers, is that they've gotten better and better and better. Their intended use is to measure the amount of nitrogen that you're uptaking in your system. Now we've made them a little bit more complex than that over the course of time. Now they have ascent rates on them. They add dive time to that. So you can see that, how far away from decoy we're at, and they'll actually measure the amount of gas. Now the problem is all dive computers have the same limitations. Donnie, what do you think one of the limitations of a dive computer is? What's something it doesn't matter? It doesn't measure in this fancy Bowman algorithm.
In the regular Bowman algorithm, it's not measuring altitude adjustment.
It's not. Absolutely. The good thing is most dive computers will take into account the barometric pressure of where you're at and make a depth correction to the algorithm. So most dive computers, Garmin and Apex, as well as Shearwater being 3 of those. The Suunto will, but you have to manually input that correction. Jolene, as you look at this, what's a measurement that we measured all through the winter that's not on this? What's missing?
Well,
we as Idahoans have been measuring this all winter and waiting for it to change.
no, what snow? The water. I don't know where you're going at.
The cold, how cold it is,
Oh,
the temperature. So no place in the Bowman algorithm is there a place for temperature correction. So we talked about earlier, I just want you to be aware that temperature and how cold we get absolutely has a dramatic effect on how we absorb nitrogen. So the problem is that's the first limitation of dive computers. The second limitation of dive computers is there's an old adage in the computer world and in statistics that garbage in, garbage out. If I put garbage data into a computer, I'm going to get garbage data out. So if I'm constantly doing multi-level diving, for example, I'm doing a shallow dive, then a deep dive, then a medium dive, then a deep dive, then a shallow dive, then a deep dive. The problem is the algorithm is not designed to measure accurately the amount of nitrogen uptake and outtake based upon true multi-level diving. It's one of the reasons that we say that we want you to always make sure that you're doing your deepest dive first, and then each subsequent dive after that, you're going shallower and shallower and shallower. So make sure that we're doing our deepest dive first, shallower, shallower, shallower. Because as we look at the algorithm again, there's not really a way for us to accurately measure deep, shallow, medium, shallow, deep, shallow, medium, shallow. It's really designed to go in a linear fashion from deep to shallow, right? So that's one of the things we have to be aware as well. Even the best dive computers have a huge challenge with being able to measure multi-level diving. So the other thing that we have to be aware of is exactly what Donnie talked to us about with altitude diving. And the good news is a lot of dive computers will take that into account, but it is certainly up to us to understand the difference in variation of atmospheric pressure based upon what we're doing and where we're at. So we're able to make sure and check our computers. Anybody ever have a computer give them the wrong answer? If you put the wrong data in, absolutely, you're going to get the wrong answer, right? Or you put in incomplete data in. Anybody play with ChatGPT? You ever get a really wild, weird answer of putting something into ChatGPT, Don?
Yeah. No, I've had some pretty odd ones, and it's all about how you phrase it. If you could rephrase the question 2 or 3 different times, and you're going to get 2 or 3 different answers.
Absolutely. Well, same thing with the dive computer. As you're putting the data in, if you're not giving it good, super accurate data, it's making a guesstimation and making an adjustment based on what it thinks. But you need to make sure that you understand how that algorithm works so that you're able to put the correct information in. The other nice thing about computer diving considerations is Dan recommends that we wait 24 hours after flying. Most dive computers are very good on this and have a surface interval time that you can watch. Now, it's recommended that 24 hours after diving, but what if you're doing big diving? Jolene, if you're off doing 3 days and all of them are 100 feet plus for all 3 days, for all 3 dives, should you maybe take, what do you think? Should you take a little bit extra, more than 24 hours after that last dive? Or is 24 hours sufficient?
No, a little bit longer. And that's something that, like, on our dive trip, so we're diving 5 days, and then we're actually flying to another island. But I think we've only got like 24 hours in between.
Yep. You're doing the moral of the story is if you're doing big dives and you're doing a lot of diving, a little extra time is definitely to your advantage to make sure that you're fully off gassing everything. Remember, the slowest tissue half time is 635 minutes, meaning its full tissue compartment is 1305 minutes, 1310 minutes. Sorry. So that's more than 24 hours, right? So as we look at this, if you're fully saturated, it's going to take more than 24 hours. It's recommended after big dives, if you're doing a lot of big diving or deco diving, that you press that from 24 hours to 36 hours to make sure you fully off gas all the nitrogen. So just keep that in mind as you guys are going off and doing really big dives. Take the time to allow yourself enough time. And the same thing with jumping in the hot tub or taking hot showers afterwards. Take the time, relax, and let the nitrogen come out. So the importance of equipment to divers' comfort and training. All this is pretty straightforward. We talk a lot about this. I don't know that we really need to go through the history of the aqualung and everything else. So I'm going to skip that if you don't mind. You certainly may read that in the manual. It's fairly interesting, but it's not terribly pertinent to your diving. By the way, this is Nikki on the Lady Luck, relaxing in front of the 6-foot mermaid or 6-foot seahorse. One of the things that I do want to kind of point out here, you might notice she's got a Perdix on each wrist. Whenever Nikki and I dive, we dive 2 computers to make sure we have redundancy in everything we do. So, but that's what the Lady Luck looks like. It's just a fun dive. I really, really enjoy the Lady Luck a lot. So the total diving system for your diving adventure, some things to look at this as you're building this up. And Jolene, you and Dwayne, I noticed this and I was very, very excited with this the other day. You really look forward to making sure that whatever you're diving is simple. It's easy to dive. It's adaptable. The other thing to do, to be aware of is as you're diving with your buddy, try and make sure whatever you're doing is consistent. Inflator on the left, octo on the right, right? That whatever we're doing it consistently over and over again. But not just in the type of gear, but how we use our gear over and over again. Going from an SS1 to a safety second to a twin set long hose to side mount to makes it very, very difficult. As we dive, we want to make sure we do the same thing over and over again so that we're comfortable in it and we're able to be safe. Consistency definitely adds safety. The other thing I want you guys to consider as we're diving along, a little redundancy definitely goes a long way. I have absolutely had a computer dive in the middle of a dive. And I have had a reel get tangled up and have to cut and get rid of an SMB. In fact, fun story for you. I was doing a deco dive. Nikki and I were in a pretty heavy current. They just released the Lake Okeechobee. So the visibility was about 45 feet in the ocean. And we're 140, 145 feet running twin sets. We had done a drill where we'd switch deco bottles. And I decided for buoyancy to put my SMB on my deco bottle, so it was easy to manage. But we'd done a drill where we'd switched our deco bottles, so which means she had my deco bottle with my SMB on it. I had her deco bottle without an SMB. I still had an SMB, so I had 2. we get into this current, we're going along, and it was time to go ahead and start our ascent. We're at 140 feet. I went ahead and reached for my SMB. I got it on my reel. I started to send it to the surface, and unfortunately, the reel got caught up to the point we were in a heavy 3 to 4 knot current in the ocean, pulling me to the surface. I got pulled up by about 35, 40 feet, and about 35, 40 feet ahead of them. And it was still pulling me. So I ripped my knife off. I cut the SMB and let it fly to the surface. The problem was I'd gotten far enough ahead of them. There was a break in the current where the current kept going straight and it turned left. Well, what happened is Nikki and our other dive buddy made the left turn. I kept going straight, but I didn't see that they made the turn. I couldn't swim back to them because the current was way too heavy, and I couldn't see them any longer. So all of a sudden, I was by myself. No big deal. I decided to reach down and find my second SMB. It was gone. Nikki had it. I was like, oh, crap. So definitely a stressful moment for me. I went ahead. Luckily, there was another diver down a little farther. It was diving a rebreather. I was able to buddy up with him. He had an SMB. I let him know that it was time for me to start my deco ascent, and he went ahead and launched an SMB for us. But in that situation, we were covering a pretty large area, and without an SMB, the boat would have had a harder time finding me. So redundancy definitely goes a long way in all diving. I definitely encourage that a lot. Your delivery system, functions and cylinders. So understanding what kind of cylinders you have, doubles or twin set stage cylinders, single valves, nitrox, and oxygen service ratings, cylinder identification, and cylinder care. So let's start with the types of cylinders. So there's two different basic types of cylinders that we use. There's aluminums and there's steels. And within the steel realms, there's low pressure and high pressure. And exactly what you're thinking, low pressure tanks hold less pressure. High pressure tanks hold more pressure. Yeah. So the nice thing with having a steel cylinder over an aluminum cylinder is the pressure differentiation, or the buoyancy characteristic differentiation is a lot less. It will not float at the end of the dive. The nice thing is, as you move up into diving and you want to start getting into redundancy, you can actually move over to doubles or twin sets. Oddly enough, anybody know what the difference between doubles and twin sets is? Don, do you know?
I'm going to go with that there's not a difference, or that the difference is that they're not tied together.
There is not a difference. It depends. If you're in Europe, they call it twin sets, and in America, they call it doubles. That's the only difference. So if you hear the terms, they're interchangeable. I like saying twin sets because it throws people off just for fun instead of using the U.S. term of doubles. So that's just my way of being annoying to other technical divers. The nice thing is with a set of twin sets is you have the ability to isolate. You're running 2 sets of tanks, 2 first stages, 2 second stages. So if something happens and I have a free flow or a catastrophic gas failure on one side, I can simply take this handle in the middle. I can isolate out. I can turn the other gas off, and I can breathe from the other side. So I have a redundant gas source. Now, Dallin, if I'm diving twin sets, am I necessarily diving in a technical format?
Yes and no. Because
exactly. You're diving a more complex setup, but just because you're diving 2 tanks doesn't mean you have to dive. You're diving technical diving. Yeah. Give you an example. Nikki and I, our last dive in Hawaii was 2.5 hours. We didn't break below 40 feet. We dove for 2.5 hours with 2 tanks for each of us, and not once did we come close to NDL. So just because you're diving a technical setup doesn't mean you're tech diving. It just means that you're using the advantages to your advantage. How about stage cylinder? Who can give me a definition of what a stage cylinder is? Donnie, what's a stage cylinder?
A tank or cylinder that you leave at a specific depth to be used at that depth or as a redundancy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So can a deco cylinder be a stage cylinder?
Yes.
Are all deco cylinders stage cylinders?
No.
Absolutely. So a deco cylinder and a stage cylinder can be the same, but they can be different as well. So a stage cylinder is one that I carry with me, like if I'm going to penetrate a wreck, but I don't want to carry a whole bunch of tanks with me. So I can take that stage cylinder to the entrance of the wreck or the cave. I can leave it at the beginning, and that way I'm carrying less crap with me. That's what a stage cylinder is. A deco cylinder is exactly that. It's an extra cylinder with a high percentage of partial pressure of oxygen to help me decompress from a gas. Now, as we kind of move through this, you can also carry a pony bottle as well. Now, a pony bottle is not a deco cylinder. It's one that you only use in case of emergency. So, easy enough.
Yes.
The types of valves, there's several different types of valves you can use. The primary valve that you guys are using right now is just a single valve, but you can actually get an H or a Y valve for your tank. And this is something specific that you have to have installed on your tank and actually buy the valve. You can't just buy the Y cylinder and take it with you, or the H cylinder. But the nice thing is that if you do have your own tanks and you want to have a little bit extra safety, you can install a Y valve or an H valve. The advantage to this is that I have the ability to turn one off or turn the other one off. So I have a way to create almost a redundancy so that if I have an equipment malfunction, I'm able to adjust. Now, again, like twin sets, or doubles, I have 2 first stages and 2 second stages, as opposed to having 1 first stage with 2 second stages coming off it on a single tank. Does that make sense? Everybody get that?
So on the H valve though, where it's so close and has your BC or hoses connected to that single valve, how does that work with your hoses?
You route them about the same. In my opinion, it makes a big spider's web mess. I'm not a fan of it, but some people absolutely are. They love using an H valve because it gives them a little bit of extra redundancy. In my opinion, if you're going to go that far, just go ahead and move up to twin sets or carry a pony bottle. I think it's an easier system to use, but there are some people that absolutely swear by it, so that if something happens and the first stage on this top one freezes, I still can go to the second one. I can isolate out, turn on the second, and I'm good to go.
Okay, but sorry, I know that you said it was a tangled web of hoses, but how does it actually work as far as the hoses being connected?
Oh, simple enough. I put a first stage on the first one and
Yep.
a first stage on the second one, and then I take a second stage hose off of each one. They still come over my right shoulder. So I have 2, just like I have a first stage or a second stage and a safety second. Same thing. It's just my safety second is coming off a different valve.
Okay, so you can intermit the hose that actually connects to the BC for your inflator hose.
You can
Okay.
put on either first stage, and you can put your SPG on either first stage.
Okay.
But as you can see really quickly, you've got a lot of stuff happening in a very close space, and it gets very confusing very quickly.
Yep.
All right, your delivery system, I feel like you all have a pretty good understanding of this. First stage regulators, the first stage is the thing that goes on your tank, and we all understand that to a certain degree, right?
Yes.
So there's 2 basic types of first stages. There's the piston type, which is just like in the engine. It's a piston, right? And then there's a diaphragm, which is like a mushroom valve, right? Now, which one would you think would be better for when it gets cold?
Wouldn't it be the diaphragm?
Diaphragm is actually right. Now, interestingly enough, I had a long conversation with Dive Alaska about this. They actually prefer to use piston first stages because they're able to defrost them faster. But in their defense, where my no-go dive requirements for ice diving is 0 degrees. If it's 0 degrees on the ice, I call the dive. Their no-go dive decision is 40 degrees below 0. So their idea is that every first stage, no matter how nice it is going to freeze. So they would rather use the piston because they're able to defrost it faster. But you're absolutely right. And typically the diaphragm tends to be easier to rebuild and doesn't have to be rebuilt as often.
Okay.
All right. So comfort, design, and convenience. So most regulators are designed already for nitrox diving, and they're built around the Rule 40. And what that means is that they're all designed to be able to be used up to 40% nitrox. Anything past that needs to have some changes made to it. We already talked about regulators icing. We don't really need to go into that. Full face mask is definitely an interesting way to go as well. Full face masks are wonderful. The nice thing and advantage to full face masks is that it keeps you considerably warmer. I could, as Don will attest, I spent a crap load of time in the ice this last season, and I wore a full face mask the whole time, and it didn't look like I was getting too cold at all, did it?
No, you looked fine. I mean, I'm surprised that you hopped out when you did, to be honest.
It was time. I wanted to make sure my fingers were starting to get a little chilled, and I want to be safe. But the nice thing with full face masks is you can breathe through your nose and through your mouth simultaneously. You also have a clearer vision as well. Some of the features and benefits of a full face mask is if you look right here, there's a valve on the side. That's called an OBV valve, a surface pressurization valve. So you can actually open that up so you're able to stop breathing on the regulator and you're actually breathing surface air. Now, one of the keys to diving with a full face mask is you always want to remember to close that valve for obvious reasons, right? Makes sense? Yep. Close the thing that's letting air in from the surface before you go below the surface. Yep. Simple enough. The other cool thing with a full face mask is they do not fog. Because there's always a constant positive pressure of air coming in and going out, covering the mask and your face, they do not fog. They fog a little bit at the surface when you're breathing from surface supplied air because it's warm versus cold. But once you close that down, you purge it a little bit. Once you get down a few feet, it stops. It clears the fog, and you have a clear dive the whole dive. Other advantages to a full face mask: they're great for rivers because the river can't push pressure on the regulator at all. You could also add comm units to them as well, so you could actually talk to your buddies. So if any of you would like to try a full face mask, let me know one of the times we're at the pool, and I'll happily bring mine out and throw you in it and let you try it. It's a lot of fun. Jolene, that absolutely goes for you and Dwayne too. And Nikki, I'll happily put you in our full face mask and let you give them a go. They're a lot of fun.
Thanks. I was listening to a podcast. Sorry, I had to move. My phone was dying. I had to get to a cord, but I was listening to a podcast about that yesterday, and they were talking about your name brand full face masks were okay, but your ones that were not, you needed to be careful. That had some bad outcomes with those. Is that? It was on like the dive radio.
Yep, dive radio actually talks a lot about that. So it's in scuba gear. I can tell you, you're always better off staying with the name brand equipment because they'll usually be CE rated, and they're safer. And so the big brands in full face masks are going to be Ocean Reef and OTS. There are some other brands out there, and Aaron's got more experience with the off brands than I do by far. Aaron, you want to weigh in on this one a little bit?
So we have, they call it an AGA. It's made by OTS as well, but I've only had Ocean Reef and OTS. I've actually worn an OTS completely out and had to rebuild the entire mask, and I've never had a problem with it.
But yeah, there's definitely some odd brands out there that you'll see. We had somebody come in the dive shop the other day. It was the weirdest dry suit that I had ever seen that people have been using for diving, and Brett and I both looked at it, and we both realized very quickly that if that guy went out and did the type of diving that he wants to do in it, he will die. Just simple enough. It will kill him. So sticking with the name brands is definitely to your advantage. I don't have any experience with the off name brands, but I can tell you that it's in diving. I've seen enough of the other stuff where people have tried using the non-name brands and have been met with negative effects that I just won't take it to chance. There's a reason, the joke in the scuba industry is always that once you add scuba certified to it, that it doubles the price. But really the reason the price is more expensive for quality scuba gear is because it's quality scuba gear. It's definitely the difference between a Ford Focus and a Yukon Denali. So you get a much nicer, better product. Jolene, what do you drive?
Toyota Avalon.
There you go. So and Toyotas are known for running 400,000 miles before you ever need to trade them in, right? They're just great little cars, right?
True.
Versus getting a Yugo, right? So that's why we do it. We get the stuff that we know works and it's got the name because we know it works. So that's my encouragement: is stick with the name brand stuff. Your buoyancy compensator, there's a lot of different directions you can go on this for sure. My personal preference is backplate and harness. And you can do soft back plates, you can do hard back plates. The nice thing with doing a metal backplate like the one you see here is that it allows you to ditch some of the weight that you need to carry when you're diving like a thicker wetsuit or even into a dry suit. I actually have this exact harness right here. This is the Hollis setup. And that I can tell you this backplate right here is 7 pounds. The nice thing with diving a 7-pound backplate is it just means that much less lead that I need to put into my weight pockets. So it's definitely nice. The other nice thing about diving a backplate as well is it's more modular. I'm able to develop it and build it up more to what I needed to do and how I needed to do it. I can put stuff in different places, and one size truly does fit all, because once I get it adjusted to my size, it is my size, and it's customizable to just me when I get the straps down. The other cool thing is if I'm doing bigger dives, I can rip the wing off really easily, and I can put a different wing on it as well. So, for example, with my twin sets, I have the LTS 50 the DT 50 wing on it. So what that means is it's got 50 pounds of capacity lift. I can lift 50 pounds from the bottom up, whereas most bladders are designed for 20 to 30 pounds. So with twin sets, I dive a lot more weight. It's a lot heavier, so I have to have a lot more lift. But the cool thing is I can take that big wing off and I can put a smaller wing on if I wanted to go to single tank as well. So you have a lot more options diving that. The other types of wings out there, they make the same idea in a soft plate. In a soft plate, you get the same basic idea. Just it's more maneuverable, it's softer, it's easier to work with. You could roll it up and put it into a carry-on as well. It's a great way to go. I love the soft plates as well. I've got a soft plate that I dive in a horseshoe that's great as well. A lot of people like the comfort and convenience of a jacket style because everything's put together. Everything's already put in the places where you might need it. Just the problem is that doesn't work for everybody. They try to with jacket styles, they want it to be a one size fits all, right? And you and I, and as we all know, Dallin, do you have any brothers?
Yes.
Are your brothers?
One. What's that?
Are your brothers the same size as you?
No.
No? How fun is it to wear their clothes?
It's not bad because at least it's baggy.
At least it's baggy, right? But
Yep.
It's not something you might want to wear all the time, right? Same
No.
thing with the BC. One size does not fit all. I can't make something that everybody across the board is going to like. So that's where a backplate and wing comes in. It becomes a little bit more modular. I can put the D-rings where I want them to be and how I want them to be. I could add different pieces to the plate. I can change the wings out. It becomes a truly modular system that I build up around my type of diving. So that's all there is on that. The different types of wings, a jacket style wing tends to come around you more, make it easier for you to dive in a down position. But it's harder for you to flip onto your back when you're trying to dive as well. You've got horseshoe wings, you've got side mount wings. There's a lot of different kinds of wings. So you just need to figure out what kind of diving you like and where you want your wing to be. This particular type of wing, this is called a horseshoe. It's great. It makes it very easy to trim as well. It doesn't push you forward. It's really easy because everything's right there on your back. All you have to do is weight it correctly. Most systems, I don't think any of us have ever had to wear removable weights. Everything comes with integrated weight systems at this point, so I don't think it's worth talking about this anymore. Let's see. Skip that. All right.
2009 pool dives, we had to wear weight belts.
Yep. It's been a while.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. With the advent of integrated weight systems, it makes it definitely very, very nice. That's for sure. That is for sure. I've worn ditchable weight or non-ditchable weight and weight belts as well. So dive computers, the feature and systems, the nice thing with these computers is they're really designed to cover a lot of things for you. Anymore that you can get pods for them. They'll integrate straight in. So all your information system is right there on your wrist, left or right, whichever you like to wear. I feel like we've covered this to ad nauseum, so I think we can move to the next. The big things to be aware of and carry with you, at minimum, you need to make sure you have a SPG, a surface pressure gauge, a timing device, a depth gauge as well. A compass is certainly nice. It makes it easier to know where you've been and where you're going. I feel like a lot of this is basic stuff that you should definitely understand already. Let's see. We've talked about the algorithm. We already talked about exposure suits, if I remember correctly, did we not?
We did.
Okay. Other items that are definitely to your advantage to carry. Floats. I strongly encourage every diver to have at least one SMB or DSMB and one reel or spool. You don't have to have a reel, but at very minimum a spool. Show you guys up for a tip and trick today? Let's see. Cancel. Put my screen up. One of the things you can do, so I always carry a spool because it's a nice, easy way to do it, but I do something different with my spool. So you've all seen the basic spool, right? Where it opens up and there's a big loop on it, right? Can you all see my screen? Dallin, can you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
What you can't see here is I've also added a piece of bungee. And all I did is it's a small piece of bungee. I tied an overhand knot, and then I added a bolt snap to it. Now, here's where it gets really cool. As you take this around, grab this bolt snap, and put that bungee around. Is that ever going to come unclipped?
Probably not.
No. Nice, easy thing you can do. I think I've got about $5 in parts into this. And that was all bolt snap because I had extra bungee. And if you guys need some bungee, I've got extra bungee. I would be glad to donate. But let me show you something. So we're all used to using one of these, right? It's a nice little double ender.
Yes.
Has anybody ever showed you this? Watch this. I'm not touching the thing at all. So I've got my bolt snap or my double ender on there, right? I'm good to go. It's not coming off. Once that snap touches it, it's going to come right off. You're better off putting it on the outside because it takes more to get there, but even on the outside, it can still come off. So you're better off putting it to where the snap to the outside because you've got more play and less chance of it. But even on the outside, it can still come right off. $5 bolt snap. And a piece of bungee. So take a piece of bungee, tie it around the end of your loop. All you have to do is take it on, put it across, and there you go. How's that for cool, guys? You like that?
Nice.
Sweet.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
there's your tip and trick of the day. I like bolt snaps over double enders a lot of times anyway. So let's go back to this. Sharing, screen share, share. There we go. Okay. All right. The next thing is signaling devices. The funny thing is everybody wants to put a whistle on their BC, but have you thought about something underwater? How do you make noise underwater? What I do,
Pounding metal against a tank.
exactly. But do you have something metal that you actually keep with you on a regular basis?
Well, if you have your spool, then you have the bolt clamp or
Absolutely.
clip.
Absolutely.
So
Having something metal to bang against is definitely to your advantage. So make sure you have something metal with you that you can bang against the tank bangers. I definitely discourage the air horn style. It adds an additional failure point to your rig. It's good for really basic divers, but once you start getting into bigger dives, you're adding a failure point and you're adding a lot of unnecessary crap to your dive kit as well. They make little signal mirrors that you can add into a pocket of a BC. Those are great. They'll definitely be better, but having a good SMB is definitely to your advantage. Other things to make sure you always have with you, cutting tools. So in this picture, I don't know if you can see it or not, but I've got my flashlight, but if you look, there's a yellow thing right here. That's a dive knife. So I keep my dive knife on my dive computer, or at least one of my dive knives. How about that? I usually carry 3 dive knives in different places, but I keep one on my computer. And the reason being is, and I've actually had this happen twice where I've needed it, is I've had my hand tied up in something, or I've needed to get to something quickly. All I have to do is reach over and grab it and pull it off, and I've got a knife right there. So I encourage a dive knife on your computer is a great place to keep it. It's very simple to get to, very easy to get to, and definitely could mean the difference in life and death as well. So to your advantage. Other things to be aware of. Let's see. Make sure some slates are definitely a nice idea. Aaron, you ever use slates on a dive?
All the time, especially anything where you know you're going to have more complicated conversations with people.
Absolutely. And certainly while we get to the point where we're good at hand and arm signals, being able to communicate and write something is definitely to your advantage. One of the other nice things, I don't know if you thought about this, but if you got tangled up down, you could always write a note on your dive slate, attach it to your SMB, and send it up. Now, one of the things Nikki and I do with every dive in our technical dives is we have a clear notice to the captain. If you see one SMB go up, we're okay. If you see 2 SMBs, there's an emergency. We communicate that ahead of time. So if we both launch SMBs, that means, oh shit, something's going on. Now, just like your car, everything that you have breaks down. So make sure you're taking the time to do proper maintenance to your gear. And about once a year, bring it to the dive shop and let Brett check it out and go through all your gear. A Save a Dive kit, you can get these on Amazon for about $140 in a nice little canvas case, and pick up a few extra things, a pair of channel lock pliers, an extra pair of Allen wrenches, and $5 worth of O-rings, and you are set for just about every dive. I got mine from Amazon, $140, and I've added a few things like channel locks and just cheap pliers, and it has saved more dives than you'd ever believe. All right, let's see. We went through that. Underwater terrain, marine animals. Let's see. All right, so a lot of this I know you guys get. I just don't feel like you guys need me to go through this in deep detail. But marine injuries and first aid. If something happens, make sure you seek medical attention immediately. The most common accidents that happen during diving are sea urchins, to be honest with you. Somebody wasn't paying attention, or their stupid husband forgot to bring their boots to the dive, and they had to wear flip-flops instead on a shore dive in boot fins. I'm not saying that anybody on this call has ever done that, but there's a high probability that may or may not have happened. So sea urchins are definitely one of the most common things. Easiest thing to be aware of, you get into a sea urchin, run hot water over top of it, and very hot water for 5 to 10 minutes. And what it'll do is it'll open up the pores. It'll make the spines easier to get out. They are barbed. Anything more than that, I saw a dive guide get into a disagreement with a dragon eel. And I will tell you that the dragon eel won. So what we did was we got into the surface, everybody into the dive. We got to the surface, and we applied direct pressure, cleaned it out with some fresh water. Tried to put some alcohol on it to clean out and to make sure it wasn't infected in any way. Weren't able to because it was just bleeding too much. Into the dives, took him to shore. He went to the hospital. He got 5 stitches. So make sure you're being aware of what's going on. Basic first aid, just like we all learned in stress and rescue. And Dallin, I'm sure you're getting ready to go through stress and rescue as well. So exactly what you learned in stress and rescue. Let's see. We have been through all this. There we go. There's your lovely sea urchin. Don't stick your fingers or hands in front of the moray eels. They don't like that. And jellyfish stings. Jellyfish stings, the old joke is that you need to pee on it. That is not true. All you're going to do is cause infection. Don't do that. That ends the slide deck, guys. We went through it all. So I'm going to pull up a test real quick. Let's go through kind of a test. I've got some ideas of where I'd like to be with you guys. How are you feeling on this, Jolene?
Oh, on this section, very well.
Good. I had a feeling. That's why I kind of go through. There's a lot on that section. I'm like, do we really need to cover that? Let's see. Let's see. Sorry, I'm having a hard time navigating my folder here. Oh, yep, Don, go ahead. Just speak.
So I've acquired 2 questions during this.
Sure.
The first is about the oxygen partial pressures. You're saying that humans can spend 3 to 6 hours at 2.0, like partial pressure oxygen. Why do we trim it down to 1.4, 1.5, 1.6? And like, why do we put a cap on, like, why is it that you're supposed to only spend like 45 minutes at 1.6? Why do we accumulate like OTUs and oxygen toxicity units in a manner like up to 300 if the body can stand more?
2 reasons. First off, those are based on the the highest common denominator. They say the average person, but we want to make sure that we take into consideration this is really set for, not somebody that's out of shape, right? Not somebody that's how you process oxygen is different than how I process, and your tolerance is going to be different than my tolerance. The second part of that is we put a high enough safety margin on it to make sure that just in case we missed it, and even though you're young and in shape and lift weights all the time, doesn't mean what was his name? Atlas, the bodybuilder, had a heart attack. So did Regis Philbin when he was a bodybuilder as well. So we know that just because you are in good shape and look like you're in good shape doesn't mean you're able to process oxygen well. We've seen bodybuilders have heart attacks, right? So we dump it down to make sure that everybody's safe. But the truth of the matter is as general thumb, you've got a higher safety margin than what you realize.
Gotcha. So when you were talking about that 800-foot dive in New Zealand, and they're spending 6 hours at 1.6, is that just because they've tested themselves and know that they can handle it?
That's a different part of the dive. So what we're talking about when we're starting to build up OTU units, and we're talking about diving at a 1.6 partial pressure or no more, is at the working portion of a dive. Now, once we've left the working portion of dive and we start our ascent, and we're into the point where we're doing a flush, it becomes a different process. We're not working at that point. We're at rest, we're relaxing, and we're letting our body get washed or flushed of the nitrogen that we currently had. So it's a different part of the dive. We're basing it upon the work of diving and the work of breathing.
Gotcha. All right. And then so this might be a little bit deeper level thing, but is there a point at which people like hypersaturate on non-nitrogen gas before a dive so that they can run completely like heliox and not have to deal with nitrogen like saturation? Or does the nitrogen just being in the tissues inherently like make that hard to do?
There is some testing on that, and there's been some experimenting on that. The general results are mixed at this point. I was reading a study on that exact thing of hyper exposure to high partial pressure of oxygen to reduce the amount of nitrogen in the system and to increase the partial pressure of oxygen in the system. So it was an interesting study, and there's several studies out there on that. Overall, the results have been inconclusive of whether it reduced the saccharate need or the decompression obligation as well. They haven't been able to build an accurate model, so the jury is still out on that. But there is study going on that.
Okay.
That study is parallel with the hydrogen study. So,
gotcha. That's all I had.
Oh, cool. Easy questions.
Okay, and then I had one as well.
Great, Dallin. What's your question?
So back when you were asking about the pressure and the rupture at 4 feet, when you were talking about the ascending rate, the ascending, and whether or not it would rupture. So I said yes, but then I also said no, and you said I was correct. Which one was I correct on? Was it the yes or the no?
You're both. So if you're ascending from 4 feet depth to 0 feet depth, the partial pressure change is going to be 1 psi for every 2 feet.
Yeah, and that can easily do that. But I'm talking about the depth where you're ascending.
But if you take that same tact and you take it from 160 feet to 156 feet, the pressure variance differentiation is going to be 1 psi for every 10 feet.
Okay.
So you see the variance there? Because as you get deeper, the gradation and the amount of pressure change spreads it farther apart. So there's a greater pressure change between 33 feet and 0 feet than there is from 66 feet to 33 feet.
Okay, so the ascending would be no.
Yes.
Okay.
You got it. So oddly enough, we talk about that you have to ascend at 33 feet per minute. I can tell you as a tech diver, when I ascend from 175 feet to 100 feet, I usually ascend around 50 feet to 60 feet per minute, from 175 to 100 feet.
Okay.
But there's a reason for that, is because the pressure gradation change is a lot, substantially less from 175 to 100 feet than it is from 100 feet to 0 feet. Does that make sense?
Yes, because then you're taking into effect the well, no.
So think about it like this. I'm going to draw a picture here for a second. Let's see. So if I were to put together a chart, let's turn that light off. This is what the pressure change would look like if I were to put it into a chart. Notice that it's a very high pressure change between 30 and 60 feet, but that change in pressure amount changes from 30 to 60. It becomes less. And then it becomes less from 60 to 100. And look what happens when it gets to from 150 to 100. There's a very low pressure change between 150 to 100, but there's a bigger change between 160 and an even bigger change between 60 and 30. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I can't see your chart.
Oh,
it's getting better.
Is that better?
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. It's trying to. There we go. Perfect. So see how there's a bigger change between 0 and 30 than there is from 30 to 60, and a lesser change between 60 and 100.
Yes.
And even a smaller change between 150 and 100. That's why. Because the difference between pressure from 4 feet to 2 feet is literally 1 psi of change. From 4 feet to 2 feet is 1 psi. From 150 feet to 140 feet is 1 psi. From 300 feet to, let me do the math on this real quick in my head. 300 feet to 260 feet is 1 psi of change.
Okay.
So as you can see, the range gets greater and farther and farther and farther apart.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep. Cool. And you'll get it as you go along farther, and you do nitrox and some of the other courses, and we start do deep diving and whatnot. It'll become more and more clear. The more you repeat this information and go through it, the more it becomes clear. Aaron, any questions?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. Jolene, how about you?
Oh, I had to unmute it. I'm pretty good, I think.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take everybody out of the room for a minute, and I'll talk to you, Jolene, first, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Hold 1 second. All right. Just you and me, Jolene. I kicked everybody else out of the room. How do you feel about Science of Diving?
So the honest to goodness truth is I understand the principles.
Okay.
I understand the principle behind just about everything. Can I calculate the stack rate of, and take all of the numbers and put it together? No, I cannot do that.
That's fine.
But
No.
I have learned a ton. So whether you pass me off or not, I've learned a ton. I feel like like Dwayne and I went through the book together We did the test. Do you know what I mean? I understand the principles behind it.
Okay, that's all I'm looking for in this class. When we move to tech, we'll go through those principles a lot more in depth. But let's let this sink in a little bit, and then we'll start working on the math individually, and we'll get there. But I feel comfortable enough that you've been through it, you guys got it, that you're good to go. You feel good to go?
Well, yeah. If you're okay, yeah. If
I am.
If you're okay, that I can't pass those formulas off.
You're fine as long as you pass the final test in the book, right?
I did.
Cool. All right, I'm going to sign you off. The paperwork will be in the shop after. Try to think what time I'll get there tomorrow. I'll try and get there around 3 tomorrow. So anytime after, say, give me till 3:30, your paperwork will be in there where you can sign your portion of it off.
Okay, we're leaving tomorrow at 6 for the Philippines. We won't be back until the 21st.
Perfect. So when you guys get back, just pop in the shop and your paperwork will be all signed off, ready to go for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have fun in the Philippines.
All right, thanks. Dwayne just got home. I don't know if you want to talk to him or not.
I trust that Dwayne's got it.
Okay.
We're good. All right, guys. See you later.
All right, thanks. Can I?
Oh, I'm sorry. Say again.
Oh, can I sign off? We good?
Yep, we're sign off. You're good.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Dallin, how
Yes.
you feeling?
Good.
Perfect. How do you feel about this class? Did you learn something?
I did.
Good.
The biggest thing that I still need to work on though is the math equations.
When can I would like to spend one more class with you. I would feel more comfortable signing you off with another class. Would you be okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. When are you available that we can sit down and on a one-on-one in person?
So I am available all week. I took all week off.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yep.
How do you feel about, let's see, let me look at my schedule real quick.
Oh, anything but Tuesday.
Not to worry. Let's take a look at tomorrow. How would you feel about meeting me at the shop at, say, 5 o'clock?
5 p.m.
Yep.
Tomorrow? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
When at the shop. All right. I will meet you at the shop tomorrow. Just put it on my calendar. I've got you at the shop at 5 o'clock. We're good to go. I'd feel more comfortable, and then we'll make a determination after tomorrow's session if we need one more.
Okay.
I think we can get through it tomorrow, but let's play it by ear. I believe we can, but I want to make sure you're comfortable. That's my bigger concern. Let's make sure you're comfortable.
So, and then also with the equations, so I'm able to do the SAC rate. SAC rate, and the air. SAC rate being the air intake throughout the dive. But what was the other one that I was trying to figure out?
Best gas, best blend.
Yes, thank you. That one.
Best blend and mod. I wouldn't worry too terribly much about that, especially since you're not certified in nitrox, because that really would go into bigger depth than that in nitrox. So if you'd like, sign up for nitrox. I'd be happy to do that for you. I have a class video I can send you. It's about 2 hours long. You watch that, and then we sit down, and I can sit down with you after that for about a half hour and knock out. I think those two equations will make a tremendous amount more sense after you watch the video, and we sit down for a half hour.
Okay.
But other than that, I just want to go through the principles with you one more time and make sure that you have a good handle on the principles.
Okay. And then as far as watching that video, would you be able to send it tonight so that I can get it watched so we can sit down tomorrow at the 5 p.m.?
I want to go through Science of Diving tomorrow. So let's focus on Science of Diving first. And then absolutely, let's get you signed up for nitrox, and I'll be happy to send it to you. But right now, I'd rather you focus on Science of Diving.
Okay.
So make sure, if you would, could you have the book done tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll work on it tonight.
Awesome.
And also tomorrow.
Perfect. I'll see you at 5 tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Go ahead and sign off.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen. How do you feel about the class?
Good.
Good.
Yeah, I think I've got it.
Yeah.
I think you both do as well. I saved you for the last because I think you both are good to go. I'm not terribly concerned. you're both getting ready to go are going to go through my tech class at some point or as well. So we'll get a lot deeper into deco theory as well. So I'm not terribly worried about that. But I feel like you've got a good handle on a beginning portion of deco theory. I will give you a secret that the first 3 chapters of decompression procedures is Science of Diving. Without the dive mallet, without the C portion. I'm trying to think what it didn't have. It doesn't have the undersea portion where it talks about tides and drifts. It doesn't talk about recreational equipment nearly as much. What else does it have? But basically, the first 3 chapters are straight out of Science of Diving. They go a little bit more in depth, but not by a ton. And then the last 3 chapters are equipment for tech, decompression theory at a deeper level for dive planning, and then actual dive planning and development. So the first 3 chapters, if you've done this, you've done the first 3 chapters of deco theory truthfully, and you've done the first 2 chapters of extended range as well, because this class copies across. SSI is really big on kind of, I don't want to say plagiarism, that's not the right word, but duplication of information across the system. So you'll see a lot of the same questions, you'll see a lot of the same stuff. But I feel comfortable with both of you that you got it and understand it. So if you don't feel you do, please, speak now or forever hold your peace. But the good news is you're both in, hanging with me on dive guide stuff. So as we go through this stuff, you're able to ask as you go along, and you'll pick up a lot of this stuff because there's pieces of parts of this that I put in every class as well. And so through repetition, I think you'll get a lot of it as well. So other than that, I feel comfortable with where we're at. If you guys feel comfortable, your paperwork will be at the shop. I'm guessing yes, sir.
I was just going to ask you about advanced nitrox. Is that where you start moving from 40% up?
Yes. Well, yes, absolutely. So the first step in that process is going to be deco procedures. And that teaches you to use a decompression blend and start going into deco. After that, there's a choice. And so here's the straight answer on that is if you sign up for extended range, you're signing up for advanced nitrox and extended range. If you sign up for advanced nitrox, you've signed up for the books are the same. Advanced nitrox and extended range are the same books. The difference between advanced nitrox and extended range is 2 dives. Truthfully, so we go through the whole book, and with it extended range, we spend a little more time at the end of it on deco theory, and we touch into trimix as well in the beginning of extended range. So my suggestion for you two, because I'm comfortable with you both, is just sign up for extended range, skip advanced nitrox. I don't feel that there's a benefit to you guys to sign up for advanced nitrox because really, I feel like you're getting ripped off. Basically, the only reason I would use advanced nitrox is if I had a student that I was really uncomfortable with and I was taking them slower through the system where I felt like they needed the extra time and we needed to do advanced nitrox, get comfortable in that, and then let's take you to extended range. With you guys, I don't have that. With extended range, that'll take you all the way up to 100%.
Cool.
So it takes you to full decompression with up to 100% in a technical setup. So advanced nitrox does the same. You can do deco procedures in a single tank with a slung pony. I encourage doing it in a deco setup because that way you're ready for extended range. So I encourage, let's get you both. Aaron, you're already going to be in a tech setup, so I'm not worried about that. But Donnie, we just need to get you in a tech setup and then do deco procedures and advanced nitrox. And that's a good companion class because we can do it we can do all the dives in 2 days. It's 3 dives a day. It's kind of a lot of diving, but we can do them both. We can do them all in 1 day and combine the courses together for the diving. And we could do, it just adds 2 nights to the courses as well. Cause extended range, 2 to 3 nights and deco procedures, 2 nights. So we could do it both courses in 4 to 5 classes and get through it where we're really planning dives and we're getting prepared and doing it that way. And then 2 days of diving.
Gotcha.
Easy enough. Worst case scenario, we break it into 3 days of diving if we just don't feel comfortable. But I feel confident we can get through it in 2 days.
Okay.
Easy enough. Any questions? But yeah, that'll get you all the way extended range. Advanced nitrox takes you to 60%. Extended range takes you to 100. So why not just go all the way to 100?
Fair.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've done the advanced nitrox and deco procedure books. I think that's the one that you told me go do the extended range one.
Yeah.
So rather than do the advanced nitrox.
Exactly. And that's on the students I'm comfortable with. And honestly, there's I won't take somebody to advanced nitrox or extended range unless I'm really comfortable with them. So I generally tend to skip advanced nitrox just because I don't want to go into either of those courses unless I'm really comfortable with the diver going in the water, because we start, you increase the task load, increase the risk. It doesn't just increase your risk, it increases my risk as well. And I just don't want to have to deal with that level of risk. So I'd rather mitigate as much risk as we humanly possibly can so that I come back with safe, healthy divers.
Gotcha.
I mean, I carry O in the car. I carry 2 bottles of O in the car, but I'm praying to God that I never, ever have to use them.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my hope and prayer is, while I have it, I don't want to use it. So the way I do that is just mitigate the risk as much as humanly possible. So easy peasy lemon squeezy. And then we're just beware. We're going to do some cold water diving next Saturday. I was out the lake. All the ice is gone.
What's the water temperature looking like?
I don't know, to be honest. I would guess 40, 42 would be my guess, but it's going to be warmer than when we were ice diving.
I give you 30 minutes before I'm like full hypothermia, boss.
You'll be good. The first thing we're going to have to do is do a dock rescue, but all the ice is gone. The visibility looks like it's typical Ryrie at the beginning of the season. So it's going to be better than Belmont, but not by a whole shit ton.
Yep.
So there you go. All right, cool, guys. Any more questions?
Nope.
Awesome.
See you
All
tomorrow
right. Well,
night.
if you guys need anything from me, you know how to get in touch with me. Other than that, I'll see you guys at Stress Rescue tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. All right. See you then.